don't we get started today? Hello and welcome everybody to the Q4 NetSuite User Group Virtual Summit, our last of the 2020 season. We've got a great jam-packed agenda today with a wonderful cast of NetSuite experts from across the ecosystem, from partners, from software providers, solution providers, and we're really excited about today's agenda. We're going to be featuring some great sessions today, and I am going to jump right in because we're jam-packed and we don't have a ton of time. Just a quick introduction to our agenda today. We're going over our welcome call right now. 1:05, we're going to go introduce Adam Porter from Nolan Business Solutions for our first session of the day on custom fields, lists, and records. At about 1:50, we're going to have our CPE eligible session, CSV imports and the vendor payment approval process with Hussain Zaidi of Business Solution Partners. 3 o'clock, best practices for month-end and year-end close on Oracle NetSuite with Thomas Grigley of FloQast. And finally, a really awesome introduction to a new product from JPMorgan Chase, Treasury Ignition, leveraging the power of partnership of NetSuite to provide direct connectivity and opening banking channels for corporate customers. That's going to be a pretty comprehensive demo of their new solution. My name is Craig Cook. I'm your host, and I want to thank you for joining us today. The NetSuite user group is across the country in New York, California, and a lot of other areas, but we are the sponsor of the NorCal, SoCal, and New York NetSuite user groups. And in light of COVID-19, we've brought everybody together for the past couple of quarters for these virtual sessions, and we're really happy to be here with you. So we're all here on the Zoom webinar platform, and I'd like for you to take a minute to familiarize yourself with the interface. The really important one for us today, that button on the bottom, that Q&A button. All questions related to the content of today's presentations should be asked in the Q&A section. Let's reserve the chat for questions to our panelists, questions about administration, questions that are not necessarily related to the content. The Q&A gets saved and we're able to distribute it after the event. So we really like to have all of the questions about our content in there. All right. Just a couple of reminders, all presentations will be recorded today and sent to the entire user group membership within 1 to 2 weeks after the event. It does take some time to process and edit, so please be patient with us. If you'd like to get more involved with your local user group, please send us a quick chat to the panelists, or you can always feel free to get in touch with us through our user group websites or through the LinkedIn. And speaking of the LinkedIn, when we don't meet virtually or in person, there's a lot of activity going on in our LinkedIn groups for NorCal, SoCal, and New York, and we invite you to join those groups and participate. So one of the things that I miss most about our in-person meetings is getting to visit all of our sponsor booths and picking up some of that free swag, right? I don't know about you, but I'm running out of promotional pens, bobbleheads, pads, plush dolls, screen cleaners, and all those other tech toys since the start of COVID. And what about those business card drops, right? While we can't meet in person for those great one-on-one conversations today, we're bringing you a raffle from one of our sponsors. Please visit the link on this page before the end of our session today, and you'll be eligible to win a $100 Visa gift card from our friends at Avalara. I'm going to copy and post this link into our chat panel right now so you guys can easily grab it and visit that link and enter to win. Speaking of our sponsors, I'd like to take this time to give a huge shout out to each and every one of the sponsors for the Q4 NetSuite Virtual User Group. Without their support, we will not have these wonderful events. And we've got a lot of really interesting things in the works for 2021. And their support has been vital and instrumental in helping us run these user group events. And I want to thank each and every one of them. At this time, I'll take a quick minute to introduce my company, Business Solution Partners, as one of your sponsors today. Business Solution Partners has a 30-year history of providing high-level financial and operational consulting and technology-based solutions to mid-market and enterprise companies in all 50 states. We are a 5-star Oracle NetSuite solution provider partner, a Workday Adaptive Planning Gold partner, a HubSpot Gold partner, and we represent a wide variety of other software solutions from account payable to logistics management solutions that really play well in the sandbox with Oracle NetSuite. We are a global company with a local presence just in your backyard. From our humble beginnings with a single office in New York, we've expanded our footprint across the US to include 4 regional offices in California, as well as locations in California, Florida, Illinois, Minnesota, Montana, New Jersey, Nevada, Massachusetts, Virginia, and we're growing all the time. We're moving business forward with a tech stack designed for growth. Our consultants and professional service providers support mid-market and enterprise companies with software strategies, implementations, integrations, custom development, training, and support. We work with Oracle NetSuite in conjunction with Workday Adaptive Planning and HubSpot to help companies transform their approach to marketing. You'll be hearing a little bit more from some of our employees later today in our CPE session, as well as some other great partners and solution providers in the ecosystem. All right, we are on track and on time. Well, we're 2 minutes late, but that's okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a team member from one of our other sponsors and the co-manager of our California NetSuite user groups, Nolan Business Solutions. Adam Porter is a CPA and NetSuite specialist and a frequent presenter at our user groups. Please give a rousing, though muted, round of applause to our first session of the day, Custom Fields, Lists, and Records with Adam Porter from Nolan.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Right, Adam, I'm going to give you screen share, and I'm going to stop my video, and you're good to go.
All right. As you said, I'm Adam Porter. I'm a software consultant at Nolan. So today we're gonna skim the surface, I think, of some of the customization that we see available in NetSuite. I think that's one of the beauties of this platform is out of the box, it has a lot of functionality, but really there is a deep well of opportunity to be able to customize this to the specific need and use cases of our own uses and the uses of our clients. And so today really just covering, field lists and records. I know there's a lot more available out there from customizations, but I kind of wanted to cover this and some of the interesting functionality and use that I think we all would be able to leverage and make our NetSuite instance more useful for us all. So simple agenda, let's talk fields, lists, and records. So first, custom fields. What is the use or the purpose behind a custom field, right? It's really just to add additional data, add additional narrative or information around what already exists within NetSuite, right? So a lot of the times we may have vendor records, but we may not have all the necessary information we want on that vendor record, right? And so through custom fields, we can really personalize whatever record type that we're looking at, whether we need specific information for us on maybe customers or sales orders, maybe we need certain things around promotions, around our employees, right? Custom fields is really the first level down of saying, hey, what additional information can we put into our NetSuite instance, right? As opposed to having things live outside of NetSuite, what can we do to bring that data into NetSuite that really will enable us to analyze and use our NetSuite data more usefully. Actually, in the last session, I was actually talking about Suite Analytics, and I know there's been other ones on safe searches, and really, I think the core to taking most advantage of Suite Analytics or safe searches or reporting within NetSuite is really getting that data in there, and custom fields is kind of that first level. When we look at custom fields, there's a couple things that we need to consider. And we'll do a little bit of a live demo to kind of walk through this as well. As first is, what record type do we want to add these custom fields to, right? So are we first looking at entity, this being vendors, customers, employees, different more or less static records that live within NetSuite, or do we want to look at transactions, right? These are all the moving parts of our business, right? And when we're looking at those transactions, do we want to put it in the body or the header of it? Or do we need it on the line level detail? Or do we look at other record types like items, CRM, or there's even the other records looking at your account, your location, your subsidiary. Often, a lot of times, at least back in the day at a previous position, when I was an administrator at a company, I remember there was a lot of additional information we wanted to include around our departments, around our subsidiaries and locations to then enable more useful workflows and functionalities within it. And so this is a way that we can then really enhance those record types. And then when we're looking at creating a custom field, we also have to know what type, we want to determine what type of a field do we want to include. Here we have a short list of a couple of the options of being, checkbox, yes or no, currency, date, there's date and time as well, email, free form, hyperlink, list and record, which we'll kind of get into really how fields and list and records play together, or long text. And these really allow to have an extra layer of formatting on that data that we want to contain. If we think of just kind of comparing like a checkbox to a free form, if the type of data that we want to add is a simple yes or no, true or false, it's a lot better data integrity to set it up as a checkbox as opposed to a free form and assume people will either write true or false. Maybe they'd write T or F, or yes or no, or Y or N, right? So you could get a myriad of different responses. And if your data is not consistent, if you don't have the data integrity, it's really hard to leverage that data when we're trying to analyze our business and to get useful information out of it. So, we want to make sure we're selecting the right field type. One caveat that is just to make sure that you understand what the field type does and what the formatting adds to it. Another example is when we look at email address, right? This doesn't necessarily validate that whatever you put in there is going to be a valid email, but it essentially validates simple formatting of an email, that there's going to be some text and numbers, an @ symbol, and some text and numbers following it, right? So if you forget an @ within there, it'll kick back an automatic response of saying, hey, this does not look to be valid. And these field types are also very important when we look at other customizations of workflows and scripting of pulling data from certain fields and pushing in other fields, that these field types also do need to line up when we're kind of pulling data from other places. And some other things to consider, and we'll look at this in the live demo, is when we're adding these fields, where do we want to apply it? How do we want to display it? Do we want any type of validation or defaulting? Do we want any sourcing or filtering? And what access do we want? So with that, let's just jump into a demo. I think number one biggest hack I would say of NetSuite is you can put Dilbert, which has been one of my favorite things. And I thought this Dilbert was very appropriate to 2020. It is a classic. But you can read Catbert saying, hey, Wally, I pulled some strings to move you to a window cubicle. It's for my own benefit. I plan to take naps while lying in the sun on top of your head. And then Wally says, every day this job teaches me I can get used to anything. And I think every day of 2020 has taught probably a lot of us that we can get used to a lot of new things as well. But anyways, when we look at a custom field, if we come along customization along the top, we can kind of see down here those different record types that we were talking about, of being field and item, CRM. If we come over here and look at our other record, and we open up a new one, we can see that now we have those other record options down here. Account, location, subsidiary would be within there as well. So let's just, for example's sake, let's open up an entity-based field. And so this one, we're just going to use an example of me coming a lot from kind of the banking world. I'm going to be looking at just saying, maybe we want to put on our vendor and our employee records a bank country field, as well as maybe the 2-digit code around that bank. And so that's kind of going to be the running example we use today. So when we're creating it, we'll obviously want to designate a name that's going to be useful. I'll just use this bank country dash vendor, and let's actually put employee, if I can spell. Next thing is when you're creating these custom fields, do use a useful ID, right? These are the IDs that are going to be used if there's ever any layer of scripting used. Otherwise, you get assigned a really generic, unuseful ID that's going to just be custom field 6. Well, what does that mean to anybody else? Well, it really doesn't provide them with much help. Recommend always starting with an underscore because it will prefix onto this cust entity. So we'll want to separate that, and we'll just say cust entity vendor. Let's do bank country ven. Other key things when we are entering it, obviously we want to put a description. So we'll want to capture some description. I mean, knowing that we may not always be in the position we are in, so we want to make sure we can future-proof this for anybody coming down the road, that they can understand what we were doing. And then we see this drop down for the different types as we discussed. So we can see, checkbox, currency, all these different things. Right now, we're going to leave it as a free form. We do see that the list and record is available, and once that is populated, we can select from here. We'll actually come back to that kind of as we bring lists and records into the view. And another thing to know over here is this global search, right? And this is to make this field available in the global search. I'd put a caution around this because we don't want too many things entering our global search, because then if we put too many, it's not going to be as useful when we are searching. We're going to get a lot more responses than we may desire, and it will kind of impede the benefit of having that quick search bar. So now looking at our other considerations, we can see this applies to. And now this is really, let me actually make this a little bigger. This is looking at what record types do we want to apply. We can see that for the entity, we see these different entity-based records. If we come in and we look at a transaction body type, we can see that now we have our different transaction types that we want to apply this to. And as we kind of demonstrated at the very beginning, if we look at other records, right, it doesn't have an applies to tab, because essentially that function really is up here on the record type, right? So when we click, I want to apply this to our account record, that's essentially what it's doing right there. So if we're coming back to our example here, our bank country, well, where do I want it to live? I want it to live just on my vendor and my employee. Rule of thumb here, I'd say apply it to as few records as you need. We don't want to clutter up our vendor forms or our different record forms with a myriad of extra additional fields that they may have no use of. Right, so let's be specific in our application. Display. This is essentially where we can set if we want specific subtabs for something to live on, if we want to insert it before others. Typically, in my use, I don't utilize this too much unless I know a specific tab I want it to belong on. I'll designate that there. Other than that, I typically actually like using custom forms to manage that. That way, if something doesn't look right or if there's any issues, I'm looking at my custom form to modify it and not necessarily looking at each individual custom field. So it helps kind of consolidate the control there. Help, this is the help that's going to appear. So definitely, for your end users, for anyone future proofing, please always populate your help box. Moving on to validation and defaulting. Again, so here we can set some validation rules around our data. Do we want to make it mandatory or not? Do we want to default a value? Typically, my rule of thumb here is I like to use workflows for these. Again, it's kind of that same mentality of the displays. I'd much rather have a singular workflow sitting on my vendor record, if you will, managing what's going to be mandatory or not, depending on maybe some choices. So you could have a conditional mandatory, or if it's always mandatory, again, it kind of consolidates that management of it to a singular location, as opposed to having to find each individual field and toggle on and off some of these attributes. So definitely recommend using a workflow to manage those. At least it, for me, has been best practice. Next, we're looking at sourcing and filtering. And so this is something we'll actually touch on when we get to the latter half of it, but this is where essentially we can auto-populate some of these custom fields based on a source and then a field within there. Like I said, we'll get to that later. And then again, access. And this is where we can determine access. Typically with this, again, I would probably leverage more my custom forms and leveraging the access and the views that they have with that on those forms, as opposed to letting it live on the record, custom field itself. Again, it kind of consolidates that control. So if we're happy with that custom field, we can click save there. And if I come to just there's a new vendor, and I'll refresh it. And we come down to our custom, we can see that we now have a new field available. In that field, we do have that help showing, and we can see that field ID showing up. That hopefully all is, specific, it's useful, and hopefully helps the next guy or gal down the road. If they look at that, they'll know what I was trying to accomplish with this custom field. All right, now let's jump back into the PowerPoint. So custom field tips, do's and don'ts. So do look at using unique custom script field IDs. Do fill out the description and help boxes, use thoughtful names, and make fields applicable. Oh, and don't make them applicable to any more records than are necessary. Again, we don't want to clutter up our records. We want to make sure that each thing that lives on a record or a transaction is useful and is there for a purpose. Don't use that global search unless needed. Don't use a display type other than normal, kind of that free form, unless you know what you're doing. Again, like I said, it can constrain it. A lot of times if we realize, hey, maybe I made this a certain type and I change it afterwards, and we'll see this later in the demo, it can actually wipe out or clear the data in that field across all your records, right? So we want to be cautious about using the display types and the field types. And again, I recommend don't use mandatory, use a workflow for that instead. All right, custom lists. So a custom list is, essentially predefined choices for a field or for a dropdown, right? Common custom lists or common lists that we see within NetSuite. One could be your accounting terms, right? Whether this is due on receipt, net 15, net 30, whatever it may be. And that's a list that actually already is in NetSuite and we can add on to. Or we can have other lists of time zones, countries, states, projects, whatever you may want that is a single dimension list of values, right? And the benefit of using lists is it helps control the responses within a custom field, right? So if we set a custom field and we choose a list to source it from, it helps control the responses that we get so that, again, it gives us more consistent and better data integrity to then use in our analytics. Another thing when we look at lists is determine what kind of a list are we making. Is it a static list that, hey, maybe, if we're making a list of countries, it's probably not going to change that often, right? We don't necessarily need to be always concerned with updating it. Maybe that's something that's better to be maintained at kind of an administrator level. Or is it a dynamic list? And this is something that maybe as a list is appropriate for our accounting manager to then be able to add on to that list. And so a lot of that is, thinking with that list of what's the use and how is it going to grow, and what part of that can we enable others within our organization to help themselves, right? We don't always need an admin to add an additional item onto an accounting list if the accounting manager is perfectly capable of maintaining that list for them. We can help set it up, we can enable them, and then allow them to then kind of control it going forward. And so obviously a key part of using a list is setting a custom field to use that list. So if we come back and jump back into NetSuite, we'll come back to where we're doing a custom entity field. And now let's go and create and look at a list. Now a list is much more simple. I'd say at the end of the day, we have a name and an ID, and I recommend similar practices. So if we wanted to create a list here of bank countries, again, we'll want to make sure that we have a useful ID, a useful description. And then we can go ahead and start populating the list. We can put in Albania, we can put, United States and so forth. Obviously, putting in manually could be very slow. So lists are available for importing. So if we were to look at just over on our imports, we can see that under customization, we do have custom list. And so we could be able to pull open a file and load it in. We will actually be looking at loading in a CSV file for a custom record. But for right now with the list, it's pretty self-explanatory. When we look at the other options up here, we do have an alphabetical or the order entered. Right? So this helps you control how do we want that list presented to the end user. Sometimes alphabetical makes sense, and in this case, a list of countries would be great. That way, if we check this, it'll automatically reorder it as new things are added. But one thing to note is if we create a list, we change it to alphabetical, it will reorder it. And if we change it back to the order entered, it won't remember your original order. But having this option does allow you to set the ordering of your list. So maybe you can rearrange it so that the most likely to be used is at very first, and that 1 in a million chance is at the very bottom of the list, so that it's easier and a lot quicker for your end user to utilize that list. And so we could save our simple list here. Let's go back into our presentation and look at tips. So again, use a naming scheme, standardize your list values, right? Make sure that they're all consistent in how you're phrasing them, how you're capitalizing them. Make it look professional and proper. And then consider permissions for dynamic or static lists, right? If at the end of the day we don't want to have to manage it as an administrator, make sure that a manager or an appropriate person has that access, so that when they need to add to that list, that they have that permission to do so. Next up, custom records. So these are kind of, I'd say, the king of the bunch. These are where I think the customization and the flexibility really shines in NetSuite. So when you think of a custom record, I think the easiest way to think of it is a custom table of data. If list, we can think of a singular column of data. A record really then takes that column and one column and allows us to add as many additional columns as we want. So common uses, right? To store custom data in a table value, store data from an online form, right? So as we create these custom records, we can create a form on top of it that allows input and essentially collection of all those form entries within that. And really it's there for all multidimensional data that we need. So if we have a many-to-one relationship that needs to establish, a custom record is a great spot for that data to live, because you can store all that in one, and then you can call to that record as needed for whatever record, whether it be a vendor, an employee, or transaction is needed, right? You can have that one central location to maintain the data, and then you can have your other record types call or look to that to pull that data. So let's jump back into our NetSuite instance. All right, so when we're looking at a custom record, let's open that up, open up a new type. And so when we're looking at custom records, they're kind of made up of multiple levels. First is we create the record type. And so in this case, we're gonna kind of follow along our example of, we wanna have our bank country with bank country codes. So bank country, we'll put test. Again, we want to make sure we use something that is explanatory as we go through it. And so first, we're really need to build the structure of our table, and then we can worry about populating it second. Where with a list, we kind of, since it's only a column, we could just immediately almost move into populating those values. So here we can see there's a lot more options sitting on a custom record, and we're not gonna dive into everything today, but just highlight a few things. One is looking at the access type of saying, do we need to permission this access to this custom record, or do we want something that, you know, any and everybody has permission to be able to view this record, right? Or is this something that we want to permission specifically on the user's roles or the user themselves? Allow UI access. Again, this is to, if we want to create a UI form to be able to add or you know, modify records within it. Mobile access, notes. A couple key over here is one, enabling system notes. I'd say as best practice, always enable those system notes so we can maintain those around this. So if things do change unexpectedly, we're able to go back and understand kind of what occurred. Some things that I'll typically uncheck is looking at include in my global search or my search menu. Again, do we want to clog up our global search with additional information or not? Enable inline editing. So there's definitely a lot of different options that we can set. Today we'll have a pretty vanilla custom record is what we'll be setting. And then we're really gonna, this is really just gonna establish setting it up. We can see we can create sub tabs, we can put sub lists, a lot of other options to it, adding, changing our permissions. But for just to create our basic table, we're gonna be happy with this. We're gonna create it. We'll come back and we'll now open it up, and we'll see that if we come down, we have a new field, new tab along here of fields. And so this is really building out our column within our table. One other thing I forgot to note, there is this include name field. And what this really does is the first column essentially on our table is going to be name. Do we want it to be that, or do we want to define all the fields, all the different column headers within our table? In this case, we're fine with letting include a name field. It's going to be our country name. And so if we want to build out, if we think of our hypothetical table, I want my name and I want my country code, because a lot of times, you know, in my world, we're building bank files. We need a country code. They don't want the full name. They don't want, you know, Albania. They want AL. And we don't want to expect my AP clerk to remember all those abbreviations. I don't want them to have to open that up on a separate spreadsheet next to them or to Google search it. I'm going to build it for them. So if with that, let's add a field onto this. And this field, we're going to have as simple as bank country code. And then with that, we'll, let's add a useful name to the ID, and then you can see that this new field for the custom record looks just like when we were looking at creating in other records field, right? Other than we're not selecting the record because obviously we spun it off of our custom record type. So if I'm happy with how that field looks, I'll click save. And if we come over and now we want to view our table, let's take a brief moment and just add my bank country code onto my list so I can see it. And I have essentially my two fields here, but I have nothing to populate, right? So one option is obviously we can click new bank country and we can kind of see a basic form for our new record where I can type in, I want this to be Albania and I want to put in a bank country code, right? And save it. And if we save that, we will come back to our list. We can see now our list will be populated. Our custom record will now have a list that's being built out with multiple attributes to it, right? And then the beauty of this is, you know, if we wanted to have more characteristics, maybe we wanted time zone, maybe we want currency, or we want sales manager over that country, or whatever it may be, right? We can build out this table how big or small we really need it to be in our use case. In this case, I don't want to have to manually type these in, and I hate to bore you all with typing those in as we're sitting here. So let's go ahead and do a CSV import on this. So when we come to the import screen, we can see that we'll go actually down to custom records. And when we come into custom records, we can see that now we have our custom record bank country test. And so that's the record we're wanting to include. We can select our file. I have a file of bank country codes queued up. In this case, we're just going to add to it. And now we can, oh, there's my name on the top. I now also want to map my country code to my country code over here. Simple as that. Let's run it. And we can see that it is starting to import. And even if we come back and we refresh our record, we can see that we're starting to populate now our list. So now the real benefit, and I think the leverage of using these custom records is now we can go back and change our custom fields and add a little bit more value to them. So if we come back, let's see our record. Great, fully imported. We can see we have our 250 lines now within our custom record with bank and country code. So if I come back and I look at my custom field that I had made, right? Before, if I come to my, before my vendor, this was just free form, right? I could just enter whatever I wanted. It's a place, but it's not very usable. It's not very smart, right? We want a smart field. So now I can come back in here and I'm going to say, I want this actually to be a list or record now. And we can see this disclaimer I kind of talked about before, right? It says, hey, if we change this, I'm going to delete all data in existing records. Do you want to do this? Sure, it's brand new. We're okay letting it delete it all out. And so now I can come down and say, hey, I want this list or record to be my bank country test. And again, it says, hey, if you're changing me to a list, I'm going to wipe everything out because now it has to be something compliant with my list. So now if I say, hey, now I want a smart list to drop down, if I come back to my vendor and we'll refresh that, we can see now that I have a list now behind my custom fields. So now I can pull it up or I can start typing and it'll give me recommendations of saying, hey, do you mean United Arab Emirates, right? So now we have a smart field that's going to be forcing kind of our answers within it, kind of like a list function, but we didn't use a list. We wanted to use a record because we wanted some more functionality. So let's go and let's add a new field. And this one's going to be our bank country code. So again, let's add a useful ID behind it. And let's apply it to our same two vendors that we're looking at. But now what we're going to do is we're going to use sourcing. And so what we want to do is we want this field essentially to control our next field, right? If we think of our table, I want my AP staff to select this, but I want this to be automatically defaulting for me, right? Because I don't want people to have to remember, what, Antigua and Barbuda, right, is AG. I don't want them to have to remember that. I just want it to work for them. So if I come into my field and I click sourcing, and now I say, well, what do I want to source it from? Well, I want to source it from this other field we had built here. So if I click that and I source it from there, and now it's going to say, hey, that field's pulling from a list or record, and that list or record has these different fields to it. What field now do you want to pull into this new field we're building? So here we're saying, I want my country code. So now if I click save, looks like I had created one of similar. Let's add this to it. And let's add this to it. Reset these. There we go. Sourcing. Let's add that. And country code. Now let's save it. So let's come back to our vendor form now. Let's reload it. If we come back into custom, now we can see that we have our two options. And the neat part is now if I say, if I want to go United Kingdom, sorry for the auto auto filling out there. We can see now that GB is being automatically populated. So if I put in Albania, it's going to change for Albania. If I want to change it to Chad, right? So now we don't just have a smart list operating for us, but now we have some automatic defaulting of some additional fields. Right now we could go, if we want to customize this form, maybe make this field inline. So saying, hey, I don't even want you to have control to change it, right? You make a choice up here. This is going to be automatically controlled and defaulted. And now we've taken a lot of, we've taken work away from our AP staff, right? They don't have to remember country codes. They don't even have to deal with it, right? They're more or less just focused here. And then this is going to populate the data that I need. And you can imagine that with this, we can only build and further on top of it. One example that I'll use a lot of times in my function is looking at populating certain bank criteria of building a file, right? So I have a similar drop down. We can see I got a custom record here with 2 attributes. Some of these with clients, I've honestly built, 10 columns wide because there's all these things I want to designate. And then upon it, we've built a similar, one custom field that's tied to essentially a list. And then we have 2 other fields that are tied to sourcing and sourcing from that same list. So when I come back to my vendor record, if I select US wire, I get these 2 codes to appear. International ACH, I get different. Next day check, I get different. Again, it's taking a lot of the thought process away from our end users of saying, I don't want someone to have to remember this. I don't want this to be on a sticky note next to their monitor or a spreadsheet within their desktop. We want it all to live within NetSuite, right? One, it can simplify the process of data entry through a lot of our things. If we know everything has a relationship, right? If we can build a table behind it, then we can have that table live within NetSuite and let that logic live within NetSuite and have smarter forms, smarter fields, and ease the work for all our end users. And also at the same time, from a very selfish standpoint, we can ensure consistency of data, right? Integrity of data is key because we all know garbage in, garbage out, right? So this way we can maintain that integrity throughout the full process and really make sure that we have good usable data. So if we come back into there, kind of looking at custom records tips, right? So do use custom records when you need approximately 3 or more pieces of data. Do use it when you need to store data with a many to one relationship, right? It really facilitates that that joining of that table data to another field. Because the great thing, like what we just did, we could apply that to the employee, and the employee record could leverage the exact same thing that we had on a vendor record. So do look at those Excel sheets, those access databases that may live outside of NetSuite and say, hey, how do we push those into NetSuite? How do we make our NetSuite smarter? And then we don't have to be pulling out data to analyze as much. That data can live within our NetSuite. So do use custom records to store information related to NetSuite data. Be careful with the permissions, understand that, enable system notes. And don't forget, if we are using a custom form to input of that UI, right? Look at it and customize it to make sure that it is user friendly. So kind of with that last one, there's definitely many different steps, and everything always looks easier in a presentation than when you go back and look at it. And so I kind of wanted to say, when we're trying to make those smart fields, those automatically defaulting fields, I kind of created a quick just order of operations. One, build out that list or that record first. Before we create a field or anything, we want to build out that table or that list that we want to reference. And then once we have that, then we can move down to that custom field and use that field and have that field be defined by list or record and select it. And then any other defaulting fields, that's really that final step of saying, hey, I want this secondary field now to be automatically defaulted based on my choice on my first field. And so it's kind of, that's the recommended steps to build in so that you have all the pieces in place when you are creating that custom field, that record or list already exists, right? Or when you're creating that field that you want to default from a primary, if we haven't set up our first field, it won't be there to select from the list, and you're going to get really frustrated, right? So we have to set up that first field, that sourcing, that is set up as a list record type for it to appear on the sourcing of that second field. So just as a kind of a a quick refresh, when for what do we need of these three? What do we need to use in different scenarios, right? If it's a single value we're looking at, a field, if we just want to build out data that lives on a current record or transaction or what have you, a field is still really great to use, right? If we want to limit the responses on a particular field, right, then we're looking at having a list, right? So that we can define what responses we want to have in there. We can kind of control that data as opposed to letting it be free form if that would be the other option. But then if we start looking at custom tables, list with multiple attributes, online forms, that really pushes us over to the custom records. And that's where they can really shine and bring and add, essentially build out that NetSuite database that we're building. And that's it. That's, in a nutshell, kind of an overview of fields, lists, and records. Again, I think we all can, take advantage of this. If we look at what may be living outside of NetSuite, that may make sense to spend a little time, build out that record, and then have that live within NetSuite so that, the more all of our data can live within one environment, I think the more we can really leverage it to make more meaningful, useful, analytical decisions. And that is all I have for. Is there any, I don't know if any questions came up during that, or if not, I'll stop my share and turn back over to you, Craig.
Great, Adam. Yeah, no questions have come up during the event except for one very important question. Where did you get that Dilbert widget, and how do we get it?
You bet. Here, I'll quickly share again. This was, I think it was Suite World 1 pre-training, doing a certification for the being a NetSuite administrator. They brought this up. So if we come and look in our layout here, obviously we can personalize it and we can add different things. And the thing we want to add is an RSS/Atom feed. And so that essentially allows us to pull different feeds. And we can actually see, I have a current Dilbert and a classic Dilbert, because what's better than one Dilbert? Two Dilberts. So, but when you go to click setup, essentially there is a URL feed that you can set up, and then you can define the number of links. Typically, I'll just do one. If you do multiple, it can kind of get real messy. But once you put that RSS feed, you put in the feed URL, and then it will populate your Dilberts. There's other feeds you can put in there as well, but I think
Great.
Dilbert's always a good business comical one.
Well, thanks so much, Adam. That was a really great session. There is a question for you in the Q&A. Adam will answer that question, and then that will be posted to the Q&A publicly for everybody to see. But we have to move on, so let me share my screen again. All right, and let me go to our next slide. So we've got today a first-time user group sponsor with a brand new solution for the NetSuite ecosystem. It's my pleasure to bring on board the team at JPMorgan Chase, led by Lisa Haley Huff, Northeast Regional Sales Executive and the Managing Director, to introduce their Treasury Ignition product that directly integrates with NetSuite, allowing JPMorgan Chase payment and banking functionalities. So that team is going to share their video. They're going to introduce themselves. And Lisa, welcome to the user group.
Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate it. And good afternoon. We will get to the video. But before that, I, again, want to thank you for the time. We are super excited to have this opportunity to get in front of the group. We use the term, it's funny you brought that screen up. We use the term Treasury Ignition, really because it's an all-encompassing description, and we hope it's an exciting one at that. Which is really, it's a comprehensive set of banking capabilities that allows clients to easily integrate with us today, but really built to scale alongside of their business. And one aspect of the Treasury Ignition, and probably one of our most exciting aspects of that, is really the NetSuite plugin. And one of the things that really brought us to really making an effort and an investment here is that our clients wanted to leverage their investments and streamline their treasury operations, right? So they already made these investments in NetSuite and really wanted to automate. The main challenge that we continue to hear was that clients didn't have resources available to accomplish these goals that they set for themselves. So recognizing an opportunity to help, we created configurable interfaces, adapters, and plugins that really accelerate onboarding and drive connectivity for our customers or companies within the field, and make it easier to connect via the client's ERP, namely NetSuite. And so the NetSuite we've designed to install, and it doesn't require technical resources, nor have additional costs. It's almost like, you think about the Staples commercial, it's almost like an easy button, so to speak, for connectivity between us and NetSuite. We would consider the connection to be seamless. Payments are efficient and easy to reconcile with two-way communication between us and NetSuite, because as the speaker earlier mentioned, all of the payments live in NetSuite, okay? And what's nice is that we actually won some awards this year as a result of this tool. We won the Adam Smith Best FinTech Solution and the Best Bank FinTech Partnership in this NetSuite plugin. We will have the opportunity as a group to see the plugin direct and live, which actually should be a lot of fun a little bit later on this afternoon with one of our FinTech leaders, Deb Myers. So Deb will be on a little bit later to give everyone a feel for what that actually looks like and feels. So what I'd like to do first is, again, you had mentioned, Craig, my name is Lisa Haley Huff, and I lead our treasury business here in the Northeast for middle market banking, but I do have some colleagues on the phone as well. Within the treasury space, I have Teresa Clements, who covers the Northern California and Southern Cal area. So she's a part of our treasury team. Teresa's a peer of mine. And from the banking side of the business, covering really, again, the tri-state area here in the East, I have Lester Pataki on the phone. Lester is responsible for New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware regions. Rebecca O'Connell, who has the Long Island region. Travis Arnold, who covers really what we would consider a metropolitan market, which is primarily New York City. And then we have Brian Huff, who covers what we would call our mid-Hudson, White Plains, Westchester area. So I'm not alone today. I have colleagues who were super excited to also join today. So there's a number of us on the phone. We're thrilled to be here and want to again extend our thanks for allowing the time. This is probably a good opportunity for us to just quickly show the video. It's not very long, but it'll give you a nice sense, maybe a teaser in terms of what you will see a little bit later on this afternoon when Deb joins the call. Is that something you could do, Craig? See that? Great. Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. So that's
Yeah, I
just
feel like Lisa, we just upgraded to like TED Talk for our user group. Thank you for that great video.
No, we like the video. It's a nice lead into what you'll see today. And actually, when Deb walks through it, it'll actually mirror very much the way the video sets up. You literally click pay bill, pay bill, pay bill. It's nice and easy to use. And when we thought about this solution, our Treasury Ignition, I mean, we wanted to make sure it was simple to install, little to no technical resources with additional costs. I mean, we listened to our clients' concerns. Seamless connectivity, right? So when you think about interacting and engaging with JP Morgan Chase, we wanted to make sure we made it as easy as possible to do business. Continuing our clients' themes about automating both payables and receivables processes, and really reducing any type of external exposure to errors that they mentioned that are challenged them on a daily basis. Easy communication between us and NetSuite, and really a roadmap that hopefully addresses our clients through the cycle of their business. So that's what we really wanted to focus on. It's a great tool, and we were certainly excited to bring the Ignition to bear.
Awesome, great. I want to give each of your teammates just a minute to hop on screen, say your name and the region that you're in, so that the Zoom video gets them on screen. They've been awesome for coming on board as a panelist and waiting around. So let's run through everybody. How about we start with Travis? Why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Obviously appreciate the time. Thank you so much for hosting, Craig. Travis Arnold, been with the bank for about 15 years. And as Lisa mentioned, I'm a market executive here in our metro region, which is comprised of New York City, Brooklyn, and our Bronx and markets. Brian?
It looks like we've got Brian as well. Brian?
Sure. So Brian Huff, I am the market exec covering the Mid-Hudson and Connecticut market. So we are eager to be a sponsor here. So thank you, Craig, and the team here. And looking forward to seeing any questions, comments about our NetSuite plugin capabilities, and love to share them with the team going forward. Thank you.
Awesome. And it looks like a couple of the team members had to drop off, but we've still got Lester. Lester, why don't you say hello?
Thanks, Craig. Good afternoon, everyone. Lester Pataki. So I'm a region manager here in the commercial bank. I'm responsible for our teams in New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And thanks for having us here, Craig.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Team Chase. Let's get back into our presentation deck and move on to our next session. A reminder to everybody, our next session is our CPE eligible session. And in order to receive credit, there's a couple of things that you got to do. Number one, if you haven't done so already, look into the chat and find the link to register for the CPE course. That just helps us if we know you're on that list of registrations for the CPE course, identify you and match you up to the other activities that are necessary for your CPE credit. And those activities include voting in our polls today during the CPE session, watching attentively for 15 minutes, not 15, I'm sorry, for the full 50 minutes. And after our audit review of those activities, we will deliver those course certificates to anybody who is eligible for them. And without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Hussain Zaidi from Business Solution Partners. Hussain is the Chief Solution Architect for BSP, and he's involved with designing basically the systems that all of our customers use and consulting with them on how best to leverage the NetSuite product and other products in our scope for the benefit of their business. So Hussain is going to talk to us about the CSV import process. And Hussain, I'm going to hand it on over to you. You can take screen control.
Thanks, Greg. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, you guys can see my screen?
Yes, we can. You're good to go.
Wonderful. So hi, everyone. Glad to be back. We have been conducting these user group sessions for some time now. It's been, I think, over 5 years. So I think a lot of you guys, if you're attending this session, or if you have attended this session before, you already know me. I have been doing these sessions both in New York and California. I have worked with ERP systems for now over 20 years, and with NetSuite for I believe 6 years now. So a lot of wealth of knowledge, and what I would like to present to you today is the CSV import. CSV import, if I can say, is the most important aspect of data migration, as well as any type of data, bulk data entry that you would like to do within NetSuite. Any of you guys, if you have been involved with NetSuite implementations, this is one of the crucial things that comes along your way, and they are pitfalls. It's not straightforward. Although the topic itself, it is, you can create an Excel file, save it as CSV, and import it in, but there are a few things that you guys need to make sure you understand. So the agenda today is going to include the overview for the CSV import. I'm going to walk you through an import assistant that it's like a wizard, take you step by step of what needs to be imported, what you can configure, what's the mapping like between the CSV columns and NetSuite. And we're going to look through some of the errors you might get along the way. And finally, if you're interested, and if you have done some developing or Suite scripts, how to invoke a CSV import through a Suite script. Okay, so let's get started. So as I was mentioning, it's the most commonly used method for transferring data into NetSuite. And you can do bulk updates and inserts, and you could pretty much update any type of data, any type of records that you want. There are some limitations, but it's very minimal. The CSV import assistant that's available to you walks you through the import mapping and configuration, and you can access it through import export option or setup. Let me actually go into NetSuite so I can walk you guys through it. So if you go under setup, import export, import CSV record, this opens up our import assistant. Okay, and I'll come back to this screen. Now, when you create these CSV import mappings, you can save them so they could be used later on, or you can then reference them within a Suite script. The import assistant takes you through step by step, starting from the import type you're doing to the selecting the files. And hold on, this poll keeps popping up here. So selecting the CSV import file, setting the options, doing the field mapping, and finally saving or executing or doing both to that CSV mapping. On the import assistant, the first thing you would set is the import type, okay? And then based on the import type, the record types. So let me get back in here. In the import type, there are quite a few options that are available to you, okay? I have a list of these included in my slide deck as well. Once you select the import type and the record type, then you can select the files to upload. And these files would show up down here. If you are uploading multiple files, you would start with the primary file and then provide the link file, and I'll walk you through that as well. In terms of the import types, so you have accounting, activities, classification, communication, custom records, customization, employees, items, relationships, rules, subscription billing, supply chain support, transactions, and website import. Now, once you select any one of those import types, then you get to pick the record type. The record types are different based on the import type, and that list, actually, I have that available here as well. This is a publicly accessible URL. I have included that here in my slide. You can access it from the web. And this is a good list of different types of records that are available to you. And not just if they're available for CSV import, but also if those records are available for scripting, for accessing from outside of NetSuite using web services, for Suite Analytic Connect, which is really a direct ODBC connection to NetSuite tables. If you guys want to get read-only access, you can use Suite Analytics Connect. And it's quite a few of these record types that are available based on the category you pick. So, that's why I didn't want to go through it. I just want to show you that it's available. Okay, so let's get started. What I'm going to do is go back into my NetSuite instance. For the import type, I am going to pick transactions, and for record type, I'm going to pick vendor payment. So now down below, first of all, character encoding, you should leave it to Western unless you are using Chinese or other characters in your text or descriptions. So, that might affect encoding, but most of the cases, Western Windows 1252 works. On the file side, or on the comma delimiter, for CSV, comma is the standard, although you have different options available. Then for the files, you can select one files to import. So in this case, I could do, if I'm importing a vendor payment, I can just import vendor payment and just create those vendor payments without applying them to bills. But if I want to apply vendor payments to bills, I would have to pick vendor payment file, which is my primary file. And then on top of that, I have to pick the bills file that I would like to apply that payments to. So let me show you what I have worked out here for this walkthrough. So I have two bills that I've created, both are for the same vendor. One bill is for $20, okay? The second vendor bill is for $40. Now the payment file and the bill file that I have set up, I actually have it here in my notepad. So I have kept it very simple. So let me start with the payment file. This is the CSV file. I'm just not showing you inside Excel. I'm just showing you within the text editor so you guys can see, more delimiters and other values, characters. So I have a reference number. I'm going to come back and tell you what that is. Vendor ID, payment date, bank account, subsidiary, and currency. And you can see there's one line because I'm just going to create one payment. That one payment gets applied to two different vendor bills. So for that, I am referencing the same reference number as my payment. So it's really tying my vendor bills to that one payment, okay? And then I have my vendor ID, although it's not required, I just have it here. And most importantly, invoice ID and the payment amount, okay? And these are all internal IDs. You can use external IDs, you can use names. I'm just, for simplicity's sake, I'm using internal ID here. Okay. Let's see. Craig, are there any questions? Do you want me to take on some questions or keep on going?
We did have a question about the format of the import files. I guess that's talking about kind of the columns and, what type of information in that CSV are you importing?
So it's actually up to you guys, whatever data you have available, because the mapping allows you to map the columns from the CSV to the fields in NetSuite. So you have a lot of freedom there. Although if you guys want to have standard formats, and I'll share that with you as well later on, I have some templates available for you guys. And this is a, we use these in data migration. So I have quite a few templates here. Let me just quickly show you what a template looks like. So it just shows you the different columns that are available, the types of the data that can go in there, some sample data down below. Also has field restrictions, which fields are required, which are not, character limits, and so on. So this information comes obviously quite handy when you're doing data import first time in NetSuite, or subsequently later on as well. So I'll share this with with everybody that's attending today. Okay, and I have quite a few of these, starting from bank entity details, which is more for the the new suite payment suite, the new bank information settings that are available for vendors and customers, class, chart of accounts, contacts, employees, journal entries, POs, credit memos, so I have quite a few templates available. Okay, so let's come back to our import here. So I have picked my primary file. I have picked my billing, my bills that payment would get applied to. So let's just hit next. So next up, I have import options. In these import options, so you have add, update, add, or update. So let me come back to and I'll come back to this linked file because I have a few more points there. So add option is there if you just want to insert new records. Update option is there if you are only updating existing records within NetSuite. If you are not sure your list or your rows in the CSV file might exist or might not exist, pick the add or update option because it will do both for you. Okay. Now there are some advanced options below. So if I expand this, and this would be different based on which features are enabled and which version of NetSuite you are using. Okay, so some of them are self-explanatory, like a CSV decimal delimiter. It's there because sometime it could be a comma. Believe me, or they are regions where instead of period they use comma or decimal. Log system notes, custom fields, override missing fields. Again, self-explanatory. You can validate mandatory custom fields. So import would check if the custom field that are set as required. So when you create custom field, and you add it to a form, you can mark it as required. And this import option would make sure that all the custom fields are either mapped or have a default value when you're bringing new data in. Okay. There's override sublist option. I'm going to go over that. It has a few things that I want to touch upon. You can choose to ignore read-only fields. And also if there's a multi-select field, you can have different values or multiple values in the CSV, just delimited by pipe or whichever character you want to choose, you can fill in there. You can also have a custom form. So whichever form you want to pick, you can pick. So whenever if it's an entity or a transaction that gets created within NetSuite, it would use this form as the default. Okay. And then finally, run server suite script or trigger workflows. This option, I keep it enabled, but there are times I have unchecked it because it can affect throttling as well as performance, and you can get timeout errors or usage limit exceeded errors, and I'll talk about that in a second. So first, the missing fields, if you leave any CSV field empty, meaning they are mapped, but they don't have any data, that does not mean NetSuite is going to clear that field. Okay, it just won't update that. To keep that in mind. For sublists are related records. For an easiest example is if you're creating a sales order, any of the line items are really part of the item sublist. Or if you're creating a customer, any of the addresses, because there could be multiple addresses, are part of the address sublist, right? So you can set some of these options through CSV import preferences, which is, by the way, available under setup, import, export, and CSV import preference. And I'll quickly show you that. Okay, so these options are available to you. If override sublist is enabled, then the CSV file sublist rows completely replace existing sublist data. That means if you are updating an existing NetSuite transaction record and you're referencing a specific sublist within that transaction, all the data gets overwritten. Okay. If it's disabled, then it has a different behavior based on if it's a keyed sublist, meaning there is a primary key, or other sublists where the key is not important. Okay, for keyed sublists, it only selectively updates the sublist. For other sublists, it just appends at the end. Okay, and by the way, there's no way to delete sublist data. You can either update it or you can append to it. There's an option that I don't have enabled on my instance here, which is to prevent duplicate records. So as you import the CSV data, you can check, actually not you, but NetSuite will check for you if there are duplicate records. And it can block import of the duplicates. Okay.
Hussain, we actually have a couple of questions in the Q&A. The first one, going back one step, is could you give an example of what you were just talking about?
Hold on, let me check the question. I didn't see that here.
I just
can you
think
give an example
on the last slide.
Hold on, which side was it before?
Yep. Of the sublist.
Of the sublist. Yes. Yeah. So sublist is what actually I have here. So in my payments, this bills that the payment is getting applied to, this is part of a sublist. Okay. And when the payment gets created, I'll show you. If I am updating an existing payment, then any entries in this sublist would overwrite everything that's currently there. If I enable this override sublist, or if I check that box, okay? If it's disabled, or if I uncheck it, then only the ones where if they're key sublists, which for the bills, it is, when you apply the bills, it is a key sublist, and it is only going to update the ones that are key, that where the key matches. For a non-keyed sublist, it would just append the entries to the end of that sublist. So maybe an example would be worthwhile here. Let me just open up an existing payments so you guys can see what that means. Let's look at this one. So down here, this is a vendor payment that's applied to one of the bills. So this vendor bills is a sublist. Although there's just one row in this, but if that payment was applied to multiple vendor bills, you would see that many entries here. And this is a key sublist. So whenever you're updating this vendor payment, if, and let me go back to my import assistant. If this option is checked, then it'll clear out all the applied payments and just do a new application from scratch. If it is unchecked, then it would just go and update the keyed entries, because this is a keyed sublist. It would only go where the update this bill if the key matches. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. So going back a couple of minutes, you were showing us some templates for import, and there was a
Yes.
question from Linda. Is there an advanced journal entry template?
Good question. Advanced journal entry template. Not in this list, but I can get you an advanced journal entry template. It's a little bit off topic, but I can tell you, because that has come up before. In the advanced journal entry template, or sorry, in the advanced journal entry screen or option, there is an import. Keep in mind, as I was mentioning earlier, there's certain transactions or certain types of data that are available for import outside of the CSV import. And so journal entries or intercompany journal entries are one that are available outside of CSV import, and you can do it from here. Budgets is another that you can import outside of the CSV and do an import from here. But what I was going to mention to you is, if you come to the advanced intercompany journal entry, you would see that it would provide you a sample. And I can just open an Excel here for you guys to see. This is not as elaborate as I was, the other example I was showing you. Let me open that. But at least it gives you the columns. Right? So you guys can see this is, you know, it has more detail. That you know, it talks about column by column what information is available and what's needed. So Craig, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's great. Let's press forward.
Okay, wonderful. So we talked about preventing the duplicate records, and that option could be turned on, and CSV import can kick back duplicate transactions, so they won't be imported. Okay, but you have to turn it on. It's so this duplicate detection merge feature has to be enabled for this. So next two options, which actually I don't think I have enabled on my session as well, is for multi-threading and for queuing. This is only available if you have the Suite Cloud Plus license. By default, whenever you're doing a CSV import or any import job, it runs on a single thread sequentially. So one import will run, and then whatever is next would run after that. But that could slow down, because if you're importing a lot of data, you know, and maybe for data migration is not a big deal. Data migration you're doing before go live, you have more time, you can bring the data slowly, or, you know, maybe in a couple of tries. But if you're doing imports on regular basis, the performance could be an issue, or import could backlog. In that case, you could use multi-threading. So there are two options there. First of all, for multi-threading, if your data imports have a lot of rows, you can use multiple threads to import those in. This is different than queues. You just keep in mind, this is running the same import file, dividing it up on multiple threads, and trying to bring that data in, you know, just in a parallel fashion. One thing you also have to keep in mind, if you have Suite Cloud Plus and multi-threading is turned on, the sequence is not guaranteed. So you might have payments, for example, listed from start first payment, second payment. You might have sequenced it by date, but that's not how they will get created. Multi-threading, has a life of its own. It would create whichever payment, it gets to and whenever it gets to it. In contrast to multi-threading, there's also queuing that's available. So what queues allows you to do is to schedule or is to run CSV import on a different queue. So you can, for example, run 5 CSV import in parallel, one on each queue, and each queue operates on its own. One comment that I'll make is if you guys are on a single NetSuite queuing instance and you're migrating to Suite Cloud Plus, everything by default is going to be on Q1, but you can always go and you can update that setting. I have a screenshot here, so I'm going to zoom in so I can show you what that means. So if you have Suite Cloud Plus, you would get under this multi-select value delimiter, you would get 2 more options, multi-threading and queue number. So you can check multi-threading if you want to enable that, and you can decide which queue you want to save your CSV import, or if you want to run your CSV import from. Okay. So now let's come to field mapping. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so before we move on to the field mapping, which is probably a lot of the meat and potatoes here of this talk, Shai asks about, the differences between all of the different NetSuite deployments out there, right? No, NetSuite's customized for everybody. There's no one right way to live, right? So since every NetSuite instance is slightly different based on industry or custom fields created, is there a way to generate a CSV template for a specific form based on his actual instance?
Yeah, so CSV template is within your controls. You can set up CSV template to however you want, and based on that template, you can save that mapping. So you can always just use, and actually I'm doing that here too. I'll show you in a second. Maybe it's a good segue into that. So on the import assistant, I started from scratch, right? So if I go next, actually, this is another, let me talk about this because this is important, and then I'll come to that question. So since I have multiple files, it's asking me what field am I using to relate the primary file to my linked file. And if you guys remember, I had the reference field. In this case, reference field 1, that same for these 2 different vendor bills, and it maps to this vendor payment that I am going to generate. Okay, so that's why I'm using my ref number field here to link my primary file to my application file, bill application file. This could be your payment ID. If you want to provide your own payment ID and not auto-generated, you can provide it here, or this could also be an external ID, okay? Now, coming to the mapping, there are few things that you need to know. First of all, the CSV fields are on the left. NetSuite fields are on the right. Some of the fields you can see got automatically mapped, and that's because the column names were the same. The NetSuite picked them up and it matches them and maps them. Okay. For each of these mappings, the easiest way to do this is you go click on the row and then you go pick which of the, for example, on the payee side, the payee is my vendor. So I go map that payee to my vendor and this gets filled in, right? This bill is my invoice, which is actually coming from my application file. So I'm going to open that up and I'm going to map it to the invoice, right? The date, it defaults into today's date, but I would like to map it to payment date. So I will do that. Another thing you need to keep in mind that there are different ways to match up the values. And this is where a lot of times people have errors. In the case of vendors, if my CSV file has vendor name, then I'm going to leave it as names. But if my CSV file has internal ID, which is a numeric value, or an external ID, then I should pick that appropriate reference type. Otherwise, the CSV import is going to fail. And I would do that for all of these. Okay. Now, coming back to that question about the templates. So the easiest way is, if you want, you can create your own template similar to this, which maps to the form, all the fields that you want to bring in for your form. Then you have to go through the CSV import. And once you go to the end, you can save it. You don't need to run it, you can save it. And when you save it, it would show up under import export saved CSV imports. So all the mapping, for example, what I did, it's here for me. I can also view the field map. If I click on it, it shows me the map, the CSV versus NetSuite fields. I can also click on this and it takes me to the import assistant. Import type, record type is already filled in. All I need to do is select my primary file, select my bills application file, then go next. Everything else is already picked up from the saved configuration. So I just hit next. Reference number is already set up as the link field. And my mapping is there, right? So let me just quickly run through this so I can show you guys what the import would do. So here I have a couple of options. I have save, I have run, I have save as, and save as and run. Save is going to always overwrite an existing import. If it's the first time, then it'll just save it. Otherwise, it will overwrite an existing import with that name. Run would run the import without saving it. Save as would make a copy with a new name, and save as and run would make a copy and execute at the same time. So at this time, I'm just going to do save and run. It's like I said, it asks you, do you want to override the saved import? I say yes. So the next screen is still the import assistant, but it gives you a little confirmation at the top. And from that confirmation, you can go to the import job status. And here you can see 2, 3, 5. Yep. So this is the one that just ran, one record imported. I can now go to my bill payment list, and I should see my payment up at the top. And if I could click on view, it should, yeah. So it has payment applied to 2 different bills, one for $20, one for $40. That payment amount is the same, $10. Okay. So I was able to apply to go from 2 payment and payment application files and generate that payment that applies to 2 different vendor invoices. Okay. Let's see, any questions? Let's break for questions. Hopefully, Shay.
Yeah, so there's a follow-up from Shai, how to create and save the mapping. The original question was about generating the CSV template for itself. A file with all the NetSuite fields listed on the right side of the mapping screen, or pick up an entity example items and get a CSV with all the column headings of an item record field. It sounds to me he's asking, like, can I export my fields and use that as a template? I'm not 100% understanding the question here. Shai, maybe we'll reach out and touch base with you on this.
Actually, I
particular
think
question.
I might know the question. So,
Gotcha.
Shai, there are two things that helps me along the way. First of all, if I want to look at the list of fields that are available, you can always go on the CSV, on the CSV import mapping and look at the fields that are available. But there is also a schema browser. So on the schema browser, for example, I can come and look at, where is my vendor payment? Vendor payment, and it would show me all the different fields that are available, and I can pick and choose which fields I want to bring in. Okay, so that's one option. There's also a hack that you can do, and that is for any type of screen within NetSuite. At the end of the URL, if you put ampersand XML equals to true or equals to T, it would give you an XML dump of all the fields that are available on that form. Okay, so that comes in handy as well. And this includes hidden field also, which you won't see on the form. Okay. So
that's really cool. Can you just repeat that that string at the end?
Yeah. So at the end, you have to type ampersand XML equals to T, and it would just render a full XML string and it works for any type of entity you have within NetSuite. So for example, I can go to a vendor bill and do the same. Previously, I was doing it on the vendor payment, but I can also do it on the vendor bill. I can do it on the vendor. Wherever I am, I can do this. Okay. There we go. And by the way, these are where you see the list. This is usually the sub list that I am mentioning or I'm talking about. Okay. Okay. Let's see what else I have. So we talked about field mapping. We talked how CSV fields are on the left, NetSuite fields are on the right. If there are any required fields, they would be listed. They would be pre-filled on the mapping. Okay, so you must map those required fields first, because without mapping the required fields, you're going to run into issues. Now your import is going to fail, and you might not have a good error to go by. Okay. So with the CSV field mapping, like I said, map the required fields first. I think NetSuite won't even let you go to the next screen till your required fields are mapped. Make sure your reference type is selected and mapped correctly between all the link files and the primary files. You can also set default values. So you can set default values for each of the fields. You can either map it to a CSV or you can just provide a value during the field mapping, okay? And then you can also set null values. For NetSuite One World, if you're importing any of these record types, including chart of accounts, contact, customers, employees, jobs, which are projects, leads, partners, prospects, or vendors, you have to provide the subsidiary. For other import types, a record type subsidiary is not required because it gets inferred from one of these entities. Sublist fields are at the bottom. So let me actually go back and show you that quickly. So let me go back to the import assistant here. Let me pick my primary in my builds. My linked reference number, and now the field. So with sublist shows up at the bottom right here. Okay. And this is, you know, if you have more than one, you can always do an add on this. Otherwise, you would be just mapping the sublist to the fields from the other file that you have. And this is how I'm able to say this vendor payment that's getting created, it gets applied to the vendor bills in this sublist. Okay. The address is there because I can have multiple vendor addresses and I can include that. Okay. If there are multiple sublists that are available, you would have this little add symbol. This add right here that would show up. Okay. Save and starting the import, we already talked about it. The only thing I'm going to mention is the script ID. You can provide a custom script ID that can come in handy if you want to call this import from SuiteScript. Okay. And actually, that's what I would like to show you next. And I think that would be the last topic. And then I'll open it up for questions. So for SuiteScript, let me just see if I can make it easier for anybody that, for a lot of you folks that are not developers. So what I am going to do is the same import files that I used Import Assistant for, I have uploaded them to an AP folder on my file cabinet. Okay, so file cabinet you can access from documents, files, file cabinet. And this is where my payment and payment application file is uploaded to. Now, I have a SuiteScript. Let me close all this. This SuiteScript, you know, it might be, that font might be too small for you guys. So let me show you here. So that SuiteScript is, all it's doing is taking the application and the payment file, and using those files, it's creating a task. A task is of CSV import, and it references the mapping ID. So that mapping ID could be a numeric ID, internal ID, or it could be the script ID that you set up when you save that CSV map. Okay, let me show you where I got that ID from. So when I go to setup, I go to import export, save CSV import, and this is the ID right here. That file I showed you is an older file, but the ID here is 183. So if I go back to my script, and if I can edit this, there are other functions in here as well, so I'm going to skip those. But let me bring you to the import here. So right there, the mapping ID is 183. The file path is AP, and that's where these two files are. Okay. So let me run through this script. So all I'm going to do is now go to the deployment. You can set this up as scheduled. So a lot of time it comes in handy if you have files coming in from outside of NetSuite, or even people are uploading files to the file cabinet, and you want a scheduled service that can go look up those files and import the data in. Okay, so this script assumes the file sitting in that AP folder. And all I'm going to do is click on save and save and execute. So that's a little trick you can do. If it's a scheduled script, you can execute it on demand. You don't have to wait for the scheduled interval. It can just run on demand. So this got completed. Now, interesting enough, if I go and look at my CSV import status, it shows up right here and it says one record imported. And if I go here under my vendor bills, my vendor payments, now I should have two payments. This payment I brought in through manual import, and this payment was brought into the Suite script import. And both utilize the same import mapping. And that's the beauty of it. You can create mapping, you can keep it all the information in one place, and then you can, you have a choice. You can import it manually when you want, or you can run a script and the script can trigger it. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have? We covered that. Canceling CSV import, the only caveat there is if it's pending, it would cancel, no problem. If it's processing, it can only cancel the records that it hasn't imported yet. And when you get your notification, it will tell you which records have been imported and which ones were not. Okay. Let me also show you what an error with import completion looks like. So in this case, this email notification was generated from that CSV import, and it just tells you what ran, how many records were imported. If it failed, it would have told you which one failed or which one were canceled. And this email gets generated regardless whether the import was done through a Suite script or it was done manually. Okay. So let me take a breather. Let's open the floor for questions. See if you guys would like, and you can ask questions about the CSV import, or if you have any general questions about NetSuite, feel free to ask as well.
Great. At this time, Hussain, I'm going to direct everybody to the raising of the hand button. If you would like to raise your hand and ask a question live today, I can unmute you and we can ask a question to Hussain. And I'll just take this moment to say thank you, Hussain, for a great presentation on CSV import status. Hussain stepped up last minute. We were supposed to have another presenter kind of split time with him, and he was able to take both the sessions and kind of combine them into one. So awesome. Thank you for that, Hussain.
Not a problem.
Again, if you have any questions, you can go over to that Q&A panel or do the hand raising, and we can ask that question live. I'll also direct our CPAs to take your last poll. We're going to be closing that down soon. Thanks for all the participation on the CPA polls today. And I'm looking forward to getting those credits out to everybody. You may have done just too good of a job because the Q&A panel is kind of quiet right now. Howard has asked if we're going to get copies of the presentation. I'll repeat to everybody that yes, it takes us a couple of weeks to process. There's some editing and some exporting and things that we've got to do, but every attendee of our user group can expect to receive an email from us in 1 to 2 weeks with not just a recording of the live event, but also a copy of the presentation decks that all of our panelists and sponsors have given. So you can reference back to that at any time that you need to.
Okay. So thank you all. And yeah, feel free to, chime in if you have questions. I'm going to stop the sharing again here and then control back to you, Greg.
All right, I got to get my myself together here. Give me a second, and we're going to hop back into the presentation. All right, and share my screen. There you are, Hussain.
Looking good.
All right, so while we're going to take a quick pause here, I'd like to ask everybody to use the chat feature on Zoom and tell us where you're coming in from today. We've obviously got people from New York, NorCal, and SoCal, but anytime we do one of these virtual user groups, we tend to get people from other places as well. So hop on that chat and let us know where you're coming in from. All right, looks like we've got Fallbrook, California. I'm not sure where that is. Hussain, where's Fallbrook?
Actually, I don't know either.
You don't. I'm from New York, so I'm not supposed to know. But you're from California.
Northern California. I'm in Los Angeles.
Excellent. We have Yukti is from Kansas. Hey, thanks for coming by. Natasha's here from the San Francisco Bay Area. Wing is from Los Angeles. Adam Porter, who spoke to us earlier today, is from Lehi, Utah. Kyle's from Long Beach.
I saw Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, BC. I've also see a Tijuana, Mexico. Sid Guzman's joining us from Tijuana.
Okay.
That's pretty darn close to Southern California, right?
Fallbrook, by the way, is near San Diego. Sorry.
Thank you for Googling that. I do appreciate that. Vancouver, West Haven, Connecticut. Awesome. Marina Del Rey, Truckee. Shout out to Amy Jordan from El Sereno. Michelle Cohen from Midtown New York City. Well, hey guys, this user group is all about you. We miss all of you. We really want to see you, and we're looking forward to getting back in touch with you in person in 2021. Let's give it up to all of our friends in biopharma and pharmaceuticals who are working towards getting us there. And I'm sure some of you may be on the call today in those fields. So thank you to all the frontline workers. Thank you to everybody who's keeping us safe. And we really do look forward to coming back together in 2021 at some point and seeing each other's faces again. Although it will be, NorCal separate from SoCal, separate from New York. So, maybe once a year or something, when things get back to normal, we'll do this joint bi-coastal virtual summit, which seems to have been really fun and everybody working out. But don't go anywhere, people. We've got so much more content to come after this quick break. I am now going to introduce our friends at Nolan again, and they're going to tell us a little bit more about Nolan Business Solutions.
Thanks, Craig. This is Adam again. So a little introduction for Nolan. We are, as it shows along the top, we are a NetSuite solution provider. We do build NetSuite native apps, and that's kind of what I'll be highlighting today. We are also in 2020 awarded a 5-star award as a NetSuite partner. We are based actually out of the UK with a US office in Boulder and remote presence as well as in Canada and Australia. And we've had about over 30 years of experience providing attentive consulting services. As I said, bundle suite app development as well. And I think there might be a button to click to populate those 2 white boxes, Craig. And the two that, if you can, there we go. First, the two bundles I want to highlight is our advanced bank reconciliation. So as you would assume, this reconciles bank accounts, credit cards, merchant gateways, and corporate credit cards. And I think the advantage of the Nolan bundle is really the flexibility and the enhanced matching criteria that we're able to provide with multiple criteria, priority levels, amount tolerances, and grouping rules. As well as that, we are flexible on the different import options of how to pull in that bank data. And we can also auto post reconciling transactions through journals, customer payments, advanced intercompany journals, and as well as incorporating any custom GL segments onto those auto postings. We can obviously handle a large volume of transactions with that. And there is process automation through our wizard to be able to automate that, especially when you're looking at large volumes of accounts and multiple accounts. So at the end of the day, this once set up, this process could be reconciling based on these rule sets, 99% of all your activity, and you're just looking at a few outstanding items across, potentially, hundreds of accounts. We've seen clients use this across and reconcile. And again, all that then feeds back to enhanced reporting, right, and visibility of those bank reconciliations. The other built for NetSuite suite app that we have is electronic payments. So this is essentially allowing you to create bank-ready files that are able to integrate with your bank and not have to, live in two worlds, right? This bundle lives, like our other one, entirely within the NetSuite space. So all your banking data is in a control safe environment, right? You have full audit trail of what's going on. And with it, we support multiple payment types, and often we can be grouping those within common files. So ACH wires, virtual cards, checks, and really we believe we have unmatched expertise in international payments. The Nolan advantage is really customization to the nth degree on those files, so that we can, build SEPA files if you're within the EU, most any XML format that's supported by a bank. We're able to develop those, as well as CSV, text, and other file types as well. Another part of that is also supporting that kind of post-processing, bill payment approval, email remittances as well. And so these two bundles are two of our built for NetSuite native bundles that really, I think, bring an advantage and automation to your reconciliation and your AP process. Nolan also does consulting as well. We have quite an expertise within actually the healthcare vertical of implementations, customizations as well. And so I want to go to the next slide, Craig. We do recommend, if you're interested to find out more about Nolan, please go to our website or contact our sales. More than happy to give a demo of how these two bundles help enhance any native NetSuite functionality and really take it to the next level, or any consulting or implementation projects as well. Thank you, Craig.
Awesome, Adam. Thanks so much. As always, it's always great to hear about built for NetSuite solutions. I always say that I think that's one of the things that NetSuite has invested a lot in, is building the ecosystem of partners and software providers and custom developers, and making them kind of adhere to some pretty strict standards to ensure that these critical business functions that you're opening your ERP up to are carefully looked after by the partners and the third parties that they allow into the ecosystem. So thanks for highlighting that. And we're about to talk about yet another great third-party add-on a little bit later today. That's FloQast. But before we do that, Thomas Grigley of FloQast is going to give us a great educational session about best practices for the month end, and ultimately, because it's December of 2020, the year-end close on Oracle NetSuite. Thomas, how's it going?
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Craig. Can you hear me okay before I have you go on mute?
We can, and then I'm going to also stop my share and give you screen control so you can hop into your presentation today.
Perfect. Well, really glad to be here. I believe everybody can see my screen at this point.
Yes, looks good.
All righty, so let's give it a go here. Thank you for that introduction. As Craig mentioned, my name is Thomas Grigley, and I'm a Senior Strategic Alliance Manager at FloQast. And today I'll be presenting best practices for the month-end close on Oracle NetSuite to prepare for a streamlined audit. So although a lot of people seem to have a sense of release right now because we're wrapping up 2020, I know there are a lot of accountants who are still stressed because we're getting ready for the year-end close and audit. So this session should be timely. Now, the reason I got asked to present today is because for the past 4 years, my role at FloQast has allowed me to work with CFOs, controllers, and accountants to help them address the most burdensome processes of the financial close and audit. So this means I've literally interviewed hundreds of month-end close process owners and worked with many NetSuite consultants to pick their brains about how they're overcoming the inherent burdens of the financial close process. So during today's presentation, I'm hoping to share some tips and tricks that you find valuable, but something a little unique about this presentation, however, is the fact that Although some of the advice I have will direct you to take advantage of features NetSuite has to offer, a lot of what we'll focus on is the process as a whole with tools you already have like Excel, email, Zoom, cloud storage, or even an internal shared drive. So, for those of you who are an accountant or accountants, month-end process owners in the audience, this should be very pertinent and very useful. If you are more on the IT side or outside of the accounting team, it should also be very informational to give you a little bit of insight into what the accounting team is facing and dealing with so that you can be a better resource to them. So with the goal of our session being to facilitate thought and discussion around the month-end close and how we can make remote month-end processes more efficient, we thought it was first necessary to define the close so we can identify the problem areas. So the close is a process that includes disparate systems and team members. The end goal is to book all entries and adjustments and verify the accuracy of financials, in NetSuite, right? To ensure accurate reporting and then a blemish-free audit. So making sure what's in your GL is a true representation of the company's financial health, right? That's the end goal. Now, a lot of processes need to happen here, like consolidations, adjusting journal entries, reconciliations. And throughout this, fire drills just naturally occur. So stress levels end up increasing. Honestly, a lot of life events are often missed because of long work days, and it's the accounting team who ends up suffering. So my hope is that we can alleviate at least some of this suffering. But why is the month-end close one of the most burdensome parts of an accountant's job? Under normal circumstances, my response to this is, like the disparate nature of systems and people that need to work together and communicate to achieve an end goal. However, in the new normal that we're working through, these problems have really only been exacerbated by remote work. So now that we've defined the purpose of the month-end close, and at a high level, just some of the activities involved, we can dive a layer deeper to begin addressing the problems that actually occur. So at FloQast, we look at all companies as having three common but decentralized components of the close. And those are month-end workflow, or your list of tasks, right? Everything that needs to be done by the accounting team to close the books on a monthly basis. Second, all your reconciliations to verify the trial balances in NetSuite are correct. And then third, all the supporting documentation, right, in your file storage. So for timing purposes, I've taken out dividers in this presentation, but this presentation will be divided into these three sections. And I'll kind of call attention to them as we're entering and leaving each section. So to start off with workflow, when we did a survey with dimensional research to mid-market accounting teams, it was really interesting for us to find out that 71% of accounting teams did not document their month-end close procedures. So we refer to this as tribal knowledge. And this means that they didn't have prepare and reviewer tasks broken out, right? Each member of the accounting team kind of just knew what they needed to get done and did it. And in my experience, this can actually work for a relatively smaller company with maybe one or two person people, working on the close on the accounting team. They can kind of just keep track of the transactions. There's not much going on, and know what they need to get done. However, as companies scale, this becomes a really big bottleneck, and it can become a very big problem. Now, part of the reason we think this is the case is because, no matter what ERP you're using, there really isn't a true month-end checklist built in. So we think that this is kind of the nature of a lot of accounting teams don't necessarily have everything documented because it's not in the system. It's not kind of prescriptive. So the period close tab in NetSuite does have a few process areas identified, right? And the ability to lock modules down once all the journal entries are entered. But what about all the tasks that go into booking journal entries or performing reconciliations? So we'll get deeper into those in just a minute. But at FloQast, we actually look at going into the period and close tab to lock processes down as a single step that should be on the overarching checklist, right? So likely this is a final step for a particular process, right, to close the accounting period and lock it down for control purposes. Now, before we move on, the tasks displayed on the checklist are based on features that you have turned on. So example, like intercompany eliminations. So each one of these tasks you see should actually be looked at as an entire process that you'll want to lock down. And typically subledgers such as AP and AR are locked down within the first 3 to 4, working days of the new month. However, there is more to these processes, which is the overarching theme here. For example, before locking AR, you want to enter and bill all your sales orders, right? Approve your customer invoices, and then apply cash. So something worth noting is that, and this is the only roles with like special permissions allow posting to lock periods. And I think permissions as a whole are something that if you're having trouble with those, I know business solution partners can definitely help out. Hussain is the NetSuite guru. So you should definitely reach out to him if you have questions around permissions or things of that nature. But the takeaway here is what your period close checklist incorporates is dependent on features that you have turned on, but still the list of tasks that are displayed, they're at a very high level. So definitely take advantage of locking processes down for control purposes, and definitely look into permissions. With this said, very few accountants will deny the fact that a lot of work occurs behind the scenes before the various modules or tasks can be completed and locked down. So at FloQast, we believe a structured close process is a must in getting into a repeatable and documented workflow. So building a great close checklist allows you to create a structured work environment, and it's the best way to simply ensure everything is getting done. So this assurance is really what provides peace of mind for not just the monthly close, but the quarterly and yearly month end as well. And chances are you'll also need this checklist to prove to your auditors that things were done, the right way by the right people, and then in a timely manner. So to provide a tangible first step that we hope your team finds valuable, I actually worked with BSP to create a best practices month-end checklist template that will provide as follow-up. So if you're interested in this checklist template, please email ccook@bspny.com, and we'll work together to make sure you get what you need. Now, our suggestion is if you don't have a checklist, use this as a starting point. If you do, but each team member has their own, or you're looking to improve the checklist, we suggest comparing our template with your checklist and create a consolidated month-end checklist. This means you have a team meeting, right? And get each team member or person to either bring their checklist or spend some time documenting the little tasks that they're actually doing. The more prescriptive that you can be here, the better. That's a big theme. So as a starting point, I highly recommend that you first group the tasks by account, such as cash. Then identify and track each by assigning a unique ID. It doesn't have to be fancy. The ID should just reflect the task itself for easy identification. And this will allow team members to reference this moving forward in an easy way. I also highly recommend considering a T plus or minus system for a simpler roll forward. And when I say roll forward, I'm referring to creating next month's checklist and creating next month's folder structure and creating next month's documents and reconciliations, right? This helps the manual upkeep as much as possible. There'll still be some manual. If you're not using a system or close management software, it'll still be manual. But if you have a T plus or minus system, it will help alleviate the pains and just the annoying steps of having to go through an Excel checklist and change dates, right? Now, back to breaking the checklist tasks out by account or accounting process, we find that usually certain employees own accounts or process areas because this tends to be the most effective way to create specialization, right? Now, important thing is, although specialization is important, one of the biggest factors in consolidating all individual checklists into one is the ability to view cause and effect, right? Your employees are no longer siloed into the tasks that they need to perform. They can rather see how their specific process affects the entire close. So I've seen, many instances where employees just do tasks to do them and don't consider what effect they have. I think knowledge into the bigger picture here is how you can leverage the minds of your entire accounting team to become more efficient. If everyone has a better understanding of the process as a whole, then you have more minds thinking about how you can make improvements. So this can be a powerful first step, but we realize every company's close can be a bit different. And a question you might be asking yourself is, what tasks go into this checklist you're talking about? So when I was interviewing Okta's former accounting manager, they're a very popular NetSuite team, she said that her team really ended up documenting everything they did within this checklist. So it wasn't only a list of recurring journal entries, but also a list of emailing someone in HR. Something this easy can be forgotten. So again, as prescriptive as possible, so that if someone's out or there is turnover, the next person can jump right in. Also, once you have all of your tasks documented, you can then take inventory of the procedures and begin to make policy tweaks from there. And I think this is really important. So I guess on this note, we encourage you to set up recurring journal entries in your ERP. If you're having trouble, business solution partners Hussain, they can definitely help here. We also encourage the team to look at billing, right? Maybe you have a billing cutoff, or maybe if you have a fiscal month, you finalize billing, the Thursday before the close. Or maybe you book depreciation and amortization the following month from when it happened, so you can book it sooner. So like, for fixed assets and prepaids. And then also definitely, look at a cutoff on AP, right? Slight policy tweaks can allow for pre-close procedures and drastic efficiency gains over time. And I think the takeaway here is by, documenting each step by account process with different team members assigned to those different processes, you can, have a really good look at what's taking up time for your accounting team, and then go from there and kind of begin to focus on the problem areas. So we've wrapped up the bulk of workflow and how it pertains to building out a central checklist to track all close procedures. Next, we're going to dive into the second common but decentralized portion of the close, being reconciliations. So there are certain features in NetSuite that we'll talk through, but in FloQast perspective, Excel will never be fully replaced, at least not for a while. So with this in mind, if your team is trying to improve the reconciliation process, I worked with business solution partners again to create best practice rec templates that will provide us follow-up. So if you are interested in these reconciliation templates, just reach out again to ccook at bspny.com, and we'll coordinate to make sure you're taken care of and you get the best practice templates here. And now I do have some advice for creating your reconciliations, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about NetSuite's capabilities. So one of the most important things you can do to improve the reconciliation process is improving your data quality. One way you can do this is by leveraging saved searches. I feel like we hear about them, all the time in NetSuite user groups. With this being said, most people, from what I've heard, haven't written more than a few saved searches. So just wanted to highlight. One moment, need to take a drink of water. Now, apart from extracting and analyzing data, saved searches can be used for things like adding custom reminders and KPIs in your dashboard, adding formulas into the results of the saved search, such as calculating amounts to accrue for received purchase orders, or calculating daily sales outstanding over a given time period. Saved searches can also be used for performing mass updates, right? Examples like setting a field value on a subset of NetSuite transactions that meet a particular criteria. You can also trigger workflows that run periodically against transactions that meet a search criteria. So an example is transforming a sales order into a cash sale to capture credit card funds upon item fulfillment. And then with SuiteScript, those saved searches are used quite a bit in SuiteScript. So for example, you could run a search against a staging table in NetSuite to create customer payments, via custom scripts or updating revenue recognition start dates in bulk. Another important part to improving data quality is the approval processes that we can leverage in NetSuite. So some clients may have been smaller when they first implemented NetSuite and didn't really need approval routing functionality. Now, I think this a theme with NetSuite is that companies are buying NetSuite when they're scaling quickly and growing. So common transactions that are routed for supervisor approval include journal entries, purchase orders, vendor bills, and invoices. So our clients have leveraged SuiteFlow to meet various approval routing needs. And NetSuite has recently released a new feature called Suite Approvals, which is a free bundle to install and configure. The features facilitate approval routing for NetSuite transactions without using workflows. So definitely encourage you guys to reach out to business solution partners for help configuring Suite Approvals. I think the takeaway here is that performing reconciliations is necessary because you need to verify the accuracy of financials in your general ledger. This becomes easier when you have a pulse on who's entering data, where it's coming from and how it's being calculated. But, with this being said, the purpose of a reconciliation is to act as an independent check. And for this purpose, there are still accounts you'll need to perform an Excel reconciliation for. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. Lastly, for NetSuite, though, before we get into the Excel component, I do want to highlight bank reconciliations. So this is the NetSuite page that enables you to reconcile your bank statement with the ledger. So on the left, you see the bank statement, and on the right, you have your GL transactions. So NetSuite has significantly improved the bank reconciliation process over the past couple of years. The new bank reconciliation feature actually allows multiple transactions to be batched together and cleared against statement entries. Recently, the bank feed and bank connectivity suite apps were also released, which help securely transmitting bank statements from your bank into NetSuite. And there are other suite apps that can help automate the process of reconciling transactions for accounts like, intercompany clearing, credit cards. But purpose of this isn't to get into all those suite apps today, but just want you to know it's out there. NetSuite Advanced Financials also has a prepaid expense module. For some accounting teams, if configured properly, you'll have the ability to automate the calculation of amortizations. I've heard that some teams are even able to view the waterfall and roll forward. And then the journal entry can also be automatically booked. So I always encourage accounting teams to at least be curious about advanced financials and NetSuite's kind of reconciliation capabilities and bank module as a whole. Be curious and learn about it, because if it can work for you, it'll be powerful. I just highly suggest vetting it out and making sure it can work for you first. So if so, you want to take advantage of advanced modules that offer this additional functionality. Now, one important part about the advanced financial module is there also allows you to perform GL allocations and then amortization of prepaid expenses with forecast reports. So there's also the advanced revenue management module as well, and this can help manage revenue recognition within NetSuite to ensuring the compliance with the AS 606 standard. So highly encourage you to look into that. But what's left is still the act of reviewing all this that's happening right in NetSuite modules. So for example, if you're using NetSuite's prepaid amortization module, it's possible your auditors are like, okay, that's good to go. But a lot of the accounting teams I've worked with, even if they're using it, their auditors still want the ability to verify that all the entries were made correctly, by the AP person, for example. And to do that, most accounting teams are maintaining an Excel reconciliation for prepaids. So I think the takeaway there is that although there's some great functionality in NetSuite, there's still going to be Excel reconciliations. So we just covered some system reconciliations, and how NetSuite and Suite apps can be used to help actually perform these. However, there are non-standard reconciliations that exist, and accountants tend to prefer to use Excel for these. So our first piece of tangible advice for making Excel recs less of a burden is creating standard operating procedures, or SOPs, for each account reconciliation. Now, when I was interviewing Okta's former accounting manager, she let me know that she had front pages for each reconciliation. And on the page, it explicitly wrote out what the preparer does and what the reviewer does. So this helps streamline the reconciliation process and ensure it was done accurately. And it also allows for consistency across all processes. So example of an SOP or a standing operating procedure was one that spelled out how to pull data and run a report, and also things as explicit as change date in Excel, in cell B9, or make sure the formulas were correct in column F. Okta also had a list of exceptions or reconciling items that were common on the front pages, because the whole purpose is answering, all right, I have GL data. Now, what's my source data? And from there, you lay out the process. And once you have the reconciliations created and accounts identified that you'll reconcile, you'll then want to identify a priority. So we recommend risk assessments. When doing those, materiality is just natural to come up. And you'll be wanting to think about, about materiality, like, right? Is this high in transactions? Or maybe it's low in materiality, but it's low in transactions. There's some subjectivity because maybe certain accounts mean more to your company. Again, I think the takeaway here is that by thinking through your reconciliation process and documenting all the work that's being done, you can then take inventory of the reconciliation process and then begin making policy tweaks to drive efficiency. So FloQast views the third and final common but decentralized piece of the month-end close as supporting documentation and file storage. I think this is actually the most overlooked. Reconciliations are people always want to talk about that. People talk about workflow fairly often. I think this part is very important and often overlooked. So at FloQast, we integrate with cloud storage providers like Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Box.com, Dropbox, and Ignite, and highly recommend leveraging cloud storage because it does have its benefits that we'll get into. But whether you're currently on the cloud or an internal network shared drive, we believe that organizing your folder structure by entity, by year, by month, and then by accounting process is a great first step, a really powerful first step. One of the biggest challenges for accounting teams that I've worked with, especially those with multiple people working on the close, 4, 5, 6 people working on the close and greater, and then people in different locations, is finding the information that they need to complete their work, right? Whether it be a controller who's reviewing work for multiple team members across multiple entities and multiple processes, or a staff accountant just trying to pick up where a colleague left off. I helped the NetSuite team actually recently evaluate FloQast for the month-end close earlier in the year, and the controller had international entities and in a team, all across the United States as well. And during the last call for approval, she brought her CFO on and she told them, you don't understand. If you want me to hit the close deadlines that you're setting, then I need a better way to gain access to the information from the team. She'll sometimes spend 30 minutes or more tracking down updated information for reconciliation. Or sometimes she'll need to wait an entire day because of different time zones, right? So this example just illustrates how crucial having an organized system in place for saving your work can be. So although this isn't an end-all be-all solution to getting over this hurdle of organizing, and standardizing the way you save your work, by beginning to organize your file structure in a way that aligns with your processes, this is really step one in making remote work possible, and it's a crucial step in setting yourself up for a streamlined audit. So this is also important because you need an easy way to access a lot of this work when the audit comes around, right? And by having your checklist broken out by accounting process, by having team members assigned to various accounting processes, and then your folders broken out by those accounting processes, you become very organized. And this allows you to save reconciliations and support in these folders. and your checklist will allow those team members to sign off on items. So we highly suggest when you have this checklist, we really suggest having a time and date stamp if possible in that checklist, and then having it saved in a central spot within this folder structure as well, so that the entire team is working off of one Excel checklist. If you're not going to have an interactive workflow tool, then having that centralized Excel checklist and having it in one spot, saved in one spot, is crucial. But with this, once you have your checklist documented, your reconciliations created with SOPs, your folder structure standardized for easy roll forward, and there's still going to be challenges, quite frankly. So we highly recommend at least one stand-up Zoom status update meeting during the week during the close process. We know this can get extensive for some teams, so be mindful about the duration of different team member shares and how frequent you have them. The benefit here is being able to find out the information about one accounting process that could impact another. Also, staff accountants can begin to learn more about what accounting managers are working on, and so on, right? We also recommend a post-close meeting to debrief. So this is where you can really dig into processes and begin making policy tweaks that we spoke about earlier. And then lastly, we highly recommend giving accounting a free day off after they close the books, or at least a super relaxed day. Maybe even a team lunch or a happy hour, because the close is a very stressful time, especially if there's strict deadlines being set forth by the CFO or a private equity firm, or just because they're you're public. So it's good to kind of treat it as a game, right? And if you hit your goals, giving the team a win. That's the way I kind of look at it. But I think at the end of the day, what really gets month-end close processes to be as efficient as possible is the unremitting kind of relentless drive for accuracy. So there's some good old-fashioned continuous improvement regarding your close, but the fact is incremental improvements are made over time. So it's going to be one of those things that you begin to implement all these best practices, and over time, different ones begin to pay off. So with that, we're at just about 30 minutes. So I'll hand it back over to Craig, and willing to take any questions and field them the best I can. If it's NetSuite specific questions, I'll probably call on Hussain to help me answer those.
All right. Thomas, thanks so much. I'm going to take back screen control here, wrestle that away from you. There we go. All right. So, first time speaker, many times participant. I think that was a really great session. I really appreciate you coming to the table with that. I hope that our audience did as well. Remember, if you have any questions for Thomas, please feel free to hop into that Q&A, and we will answer them for you. In the meantime, let us press forward. And it's a little early. Tom, are you with us? It's rare that we run ahead of schedule.
I am here, and it's good to be ahead of schedule.
Yeah, well, let me give you a formal introduction, because Tom Miller from Avalara and I have been working together for many, many years, and he has been a stalwart supporter of the user groups, along with his company Avalara. And they always bring something interesting and new to the table. And you've got a couple of really interesting new products that Avalara has been working on to talk about today. So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Tom Miller from Avalara, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that they've got going on over there.
Thanks, Craig. It's always a pleasure to be here with this group. As a founding employee with Avalara, I've been talking about sales and use tax for way too long, and for about the last 5 years, I guess, I've probably been coming through this meeting talking about tax calculations and returns and tax exempt certification. I thought this year, given what we all have been going through and how different it was, I thought I'd want to change it up a little bit and just kind of let you know some of the things that we've been doing this year and how busy we've been since COVID happened. You know, you can see on the slide here that we released a lot of new product and enhancements, including probably our most significant release for the domestic tax compliance market in several years, our consumer use tax module. That's a module that helps you assess tax on product that you buy that the vendor did not collect the sales tax on. You're still liable for it, and this goes a long way towards making that much simpler. We've released a new module or new service, Managed Returns for Accountants. It's similar to our existing return service, but it's used by accountants to review and approve the returns that we prepare for their clients. Now, its big brother service, Avalara Returns for Accountants, was going to follow up next summer. That tool gives the firm access to every tool that we use so that they can offer compliance services directly to their clients using our platform. Now, if you sell on marketplaces like Amazon, Shopify, Etsy, Walmart, those kinds of places, you know that to complete your tax return, you need to first grab their data, throw it in a spreadsheet, determine the taxes that they've paid and taxes that you're responsible for, and then manipulate all of that information to get the tax return done. Our extractors do just that. Right now, there are 4 extractors that we've built that we're shipping. There's many more coming. They're going to be released through the period, you know, every month there will be new extractors released over the next couple of quarters. And our customers can now create advanced business rules for transactions with very complex tax calculations, things like tax on tax and sub-taxes underneath taxes. This year, we have unveiled a comprehensive beverage alcohol compliance solution for wineries, distilleries, breweries, importers, and retailers. Brand new market for us. And we released new cross-border solutions that consist of Avatax Cross-Border and Avalara Item Classification. These two provide users with an integrated or a standalone approach to address the process of classifying products and calculating custom duties and import taxes for international sales. Built in, there's deep value-added tax content and logic for the EU and the UK. There's business-to-consumer goods and digital services for non-EU VAT and GST countries, and deep country rollouts are planned, country by country. The classification module includes HS codes identification for international landed cost. That would be the cost you're selling it for, plus the import tax, plus the excise tax, plus whatever else gets stuck on it. So we can also offer, so because of that, we can offer full HS and VAT code mapping as a service, and we have full support for the India GST. We've simplified the research and product classification with an artificial intelligence tool that we acquired last year, and we announced 53 newly certified integrations into various business applications. So we've been real busy this year. And Craig, if you could wander on to the next slide, that'd be great. I wanted to give you some stats on Cyber Week, but there's not much to report. This year, you know, Cyber Week is our Super Bowl week, from Black Friday through Cyber Monday and then on through this week. The only thing I can really tell you is that volume is up about 40 to 50% year over year, which is probably a good thing. And the engine's clicking along just as like we expected without incident. And that's a very good thing. Now, last month, we acquired the assets of Business Licenses LLC to manage and streamline license and registration compliance. This is a step outside of tax and expands our vision for the global compliance platform. We support tens of thousands of licenses, filing instruments, and data for 22,000 authorities in all states. We acquired Transaction Tax Resources last month, TTR, significantly enhancing our enterprise capabilities and creating the leading content database for tax. Today, not on the slide, we announced the acquisition of Impendulo Limited. They're a provider of insurance tax solutions. So they give us access to the global insurance compliance business with specialization in multinational companies, helping clients as the in-country tax representative and agent from rate calculations through audit support. Finally, we've announced 2 conferences next year. Avalara Next is our first code-based conference for developers, IT professionals, and product leaders who manage checkout, order processing, and financial systems. It's a virtual event on January 29th. You can register at the link. And Avalara Crush, our annual conference for customers, partners, prospects, is going to be held in 2 sessions. The virtual session on May 24th to 27th, and Crush Live is going to be in St. Louis, October 19th to 21. With that, I just want to do a shout out on the raffle. We'll be pulling a winner at the end of the day, and then we'll follow up with you afterwards. So thank you, everyone. Have great holidays, and I'm sure we'll be speaking soon. Craig, thank you.
Wow, Tom, you guys have been very busy over there at Avalara in a year that has seen quite a tremendous shift to online shopping and digital transactions.
It's been
really
fun.
interesting. Really interesting.
Been fun.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right. We are actually running a little early. Very rare for us here at the NetSuite user group. We tend to be verbose and long-winded from time to time, but hopefully all the information that we are giving you is extremely useful. Next up, we've got a great session with Deb Myers. So thanks, Tom. Don't forget to enter that Avalara raffle before our session is over today to win that $100 gift card. And as we move forward, so you got a little sneak peek at the NetSuite functionality behind our next presenter earlier today when we introduced the JP Morgan and Chase team. And now it's time for a demo. So I'd like to introduce Deb Myers, the Product Strategic Support Manager for Treasury Ignition, which is JP Morgan's solution. And she's also an executive director at JP Morgan Chase. And she's going to present a title that I received today from the marketing department over at JP Morgan Chase, and I was just blown away by it. Treasury Ignition, leveraging the power and partnership of NetSuite to provide direct connectivity, opening banking channels for corporate customers. That's officially the longest title of any session today, and I couldn't even fit it onto the introduction slide. So Deb, with a title like that, I'm sure we're about to see something special. And I'm going to transfer screen control over to you so that we can see what this solution is all about on the bones there.
Perfect. Thanks, Craig. I love that I win the longest title. Hold on. I can share in a second, probably.
Yeah, now we got your
Oh,
video.
there we go. There we go. Now it's going. So thank you, everyone, for having us here today. As Craig mentioned, we have a long title for our product, but hopefully the title is the most complicated part of it. So what JP Morgan has done, and really it sort of shows the power of NetSuite and sort of the integrations you can do with NetSuite out of the box. We've actually partnered with a fintech to build a JP Morgan specific suite app that really tries to create an automated, easy, out-of-the-box plug-and-play solution for clients who are trying to use banking services for their vendor payments to our particular bank. I think it speaks volumes to how NetSuite works, that this is available and that we can sort of solve the problem that I think clients for decades have been asking banks and ERPs to solve, which is, can you make it easier for me when I use a bank to take the data that I already have natively stored in my system and deliver that into my banking channel? So again, the beauty of this solution is that it really does leverage the robust API suite that NetSuite provides, and really then the power of the banking products we have that make it easier for clients to make payments. So I'll start obviously with the demo of NetSuite, which I'm sure looks very familiar to all of you. It is a suite app, so as all of you are probably familiar, downloadable. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to download it. We do a robust implementation on the back end of this product that we create a specific pipe and rail to deliver all of your data unique to our client. But for the client, there's really nothing to do. That all happens in the background. Once the app is downloaded and you're ready to go, it's available in Sandbox as well. We basically created bill payment screens. So I'll show you what that looks like so you can kind of think through your processes and how this really starts to automate some things you would normally do very manually at your bank. Hopefully my Sandbox environment is good today. Okay, perfect. So again, it's a JP Morgan branded bill payment screen, but essentially what it's doing sort of in the background is pulling in all of the approved bills you have to pay in NetSuite natively. So if you look at this screen, there's a couple of pieces on here, right? It's bringing in the bills that were approved to pay, so the bill number, as well as vendor details. And then it even shows discount amounts if you have that information. And you'll notice it'll have the default payment method. We do allow you to store at your vendor detail your default payment method for the bank. So for our particular bundle, we allow you to store what the default payment method is, and then we honor that when it comes into this screen. To be clear, we try to leverage as much as we can natively from NetSuite, so you don't have to add anything in there, but we do allow you to set that default payment method here. As well, if it's a payment or for the bill, we allow you to option into group bills for payment. So we know for some clients, there's efficiencies in saying, I have 10 bills to pay, but I really want to pay all those bills at once as one single payment, reduce your banking fees. So we allow you to set that at the vendor level as well. We know some of your vendors may want to get individual payments for each of the bills, and that's fine too. You can sort of set that by vendor preference. So once these bills come in here, you actually have a list of those. You also have some filters up top by due date, default payment method, vendor, different information you can sort and filter by, and then you can sort any of these fields if you want to sort of bring up your ones that have the highest discount amount based on date. You can start to decision bills to pay based on that information. You can change the default payment method over here, but one thing we do always say is that, if you're moving from, let's say, check to ACH, make sure you have the vendor information available in the vendor detail, or else the payment will fail when you go to make it. So the goal here is really to make it really quite simple. Either you can select all to pay, or you can select individual bills to pay. As I mentioned on the previous screen, that bundling, as an example, you're making a decision here to pay the DL printing payments more than once or more than one bill. We will bundle that up and create one single payment for the total amount that's due to them, rather than showing those as individual payments. And we also provide a downloadable CSV file if you want to sort of use that for your records, or for even maybe sharing it with folks within your organization to let them know what bills you paid. From this point, we just encourage the clients to click pay. We bring up what source account they want to pay from. What source account they want to pay from. You can select that from here. That's all set up in the chart of accounts in the background. You link your bank accounts to the chart of accounts in NetSuite. So those come up, and then you click OK. Once you click OK, what's happening here is we're really creating and going in and pulling all of the robust data from NetSuite about those vendors and those bills to create a mixed payment file that will be delivered to the bank on your behalf. So again, this is where the automation and the risk and controls come in. There's no rekeying, there's no downloading. You're really just delivering that data natively from NetSuite. So all the controls you already have in NetSuite are replicated in creating that payment file to the bank. We actually at our bank in particular have an extra step where our clients log into our bank portal to release the file. The benefit of that is the clients can maybe have CFO, oh, sorry guys, I'm having issues with my internet, I think. There was a connection issue, but usually this should work, or maybe my sandbox, and it should say it's successful. When that file gets delivered, you can have a CFO level, or maybe the head of your AP department go in and release that file as a last point check. And then that would get released to our back office to process the payments. Just want to touch a little bit on the actual process that's happening when the bills are paid. We automatically close the bill at the point that you pay the payment. We make an entry to the GL. As well, we will, if any bill fails, we will automatically reopen the bill and then make the adjustment entry to the GL. So we show in here the history of bills paid, and if they were successful or not. And if there's any error messages, you can see failed bills in a separate tab and the reason why they were failed. We also manage through here if any ACH payment, so an EFT or direct deposit, however you think of from a language perspective, if that is returned through the clearing, we also handle that as a failed bill sort of days later. So maybe you process on Monday, we get it back from the clearing on Tuesday or Wednesday saying that account is closed. We automatically update NetSuite by reopening the bill, making the GL entry, and then you can reach out to your vendor and get new account and routing information. So we try to make it as seamless and automated as you'd like, or as we can, knowing what we can. But that's really the goal of this, is really to really put some controls around this, make it easier to buy into different types of products. So I mentioned that we have ACH and check. We also have a single use account where you can pay vendors that accept cards with a credit card payment instead of virtual card payment. So what we found is a lot of clients who are really interested in trying out new payment methods that maybe reduce their costs or even have some additional benefits or controls around them. By providing this through a plugin that's really easy to use, it allows clients to sort of try it out, right? So they can say, you know, I have a vendor accepts the card. I'd like to try maybe paying them with a single use account and see if that sort of reduces some costs and makes some of my reconciliation easier in the long run. So that's really been the benefit on that end.
Hey, Deb, I got a question for you from the Q&A here.
Sure.
Yutki is asking if the pay bill page is customizable, i.e. can we add like a custom filter to that page?
It's such a great question because we've had it a couple of times. So what we have on our roadmap, because we've had that question a couple of times, and what we've done is added things over time based on requests. So like discount amount, if you'll notice, was something we added into the actual grid of bills. But we have had clients ask about adding data up here. What we think we're going to do early next year is allow a customization where you can define a field that will show up. That way we don't keep adding new fields, but rather we would let a client customize one or two fields that they want to add to the screen that's unique to their use case.
That's a great idea. Thanks so much.
No problem. It's the beauty of NetSuite, right?
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
No, let's press forward.
Okay, perfect. So that's the the bill payment page. The one thing I would touch on, we have domestic U.S. payments pretty much taken care of, which is a paper check, an ACH. I mentioned the single use accounts. We also do Canadian, what is Canadian Payments Authority, or Canadian ACH is what we'll call it on our side, as well as Canadian check print. But we are starting to hear a lot of clients on NetSuite based on the type of clients. We're seeing a lot of really fast growing tech companies. Clients definitely need outside the US and Canadian, they have outside the US and Canadian needs. So we're starting to build out wires as well as the SEPA, or Single European Payment Authority, so the Euro payment type, as well as local UK BACS payment type. And we'll continue to evolve that based on client need. I mentioned that it's a single payment file that goes, so it's really easy for us to add new payment types into the payment instruction. The real work that we're doing is around enhancing some of the vendor details we need to be able to support those global payment types. So that's really where we've spent the last couple of months. So that'll round out the payment side. I will note that we do have a positive pay offering. So for folks on the phone who don't know what positive pay is, for our clients who actually write checks directly from NetSuite and use a NetSuite check payment module, from a banking perspective, usually they need to send that data on to the bank for two purposes. One is for check fraud, meaning you tell us about the checks you wrote, and we make sure that we don't cash any checks that you didn't write on that account. So sending that data to us is really important. As well, there's some check reconciliation products that some clients like to use where we provide them robust information about what their outstanding checks are, what their cash checks are. So knowing what you wrote helps us do that. So this positive pay transmission is really where we let the client, if they've written checks using the native NetSuite modules, we bring up the screen of checks written, and hopefully my sandbox has some checks written. But we bring those checks up, and then the client really just clicks, oh, it does. They can just select them all and hit transmit. We deliver that data directly to our back office. There's no approval queue or anything like that, because we know, A, these are time sensitive things. We don't want someone walking in with a check and not being able to cash it because the information's not at the bank. But more importantly, it's not money movement, it's more just data delivery. So we try to expedite that through a direct transmission. The last piece I'll touch on is really the reporting side. So we heard a lot from clients that reconciliation. Yep.
Can I get you for one more second? So before we move on from checks, I don't know if this is the domain of your integration application, but Jiang Tu asks us, as a new user, will this app then be able to print the check using the NetSuite check format, or is that a different process?
So there's two sides of check. So if you all want to use the native NetSuite check printing capability, if you leverage, I think there's two different ways to write checks in NetSuite as I've heard it. Either one of those modules that you use to write checks will make the data about that check appear on that screen that I just showed you. You can absolutely use that module to print them in-house, however you choose to print them, and then transmit your banking data or the bank data to our back office. The other option is, and I showed that on the bill payment screen, if a client says, I don't want to have to deal with check printing anymore, I don't want to have to deal with the paper, the risk, all of that. Instead, they can just have check as an option to print. And then we at JP Morgan have a check print product where we print and mail on your behalf. And you have logos and signatures all on file that we use to print your checks. That's where it's more of a, you're paying a bill and you've just opted to do it as a check. And then we'll automatically print and mail that check on your behalf. And then we handle all the check fraud and reconciliation on our side as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much.
That answers it. So this is really another pain point we heard from clients many times is reconciliation. And we get it because we have to be honest, banks are really hard. We have a lot of data and we kind of dump it on our clients and say, here's everything you could possibly need to reconcile payments, and all the different payment types have different data. And so we get why it's complicated. And so we knew reconciliation of your accounts is really high priority. It was one of the first things we rolled out, and we continue to enhance it. So there's a couple of things we do in our module, in our plugin, is one, we bring in real-time balances for all of your global accounts. So right here, we show 4 accounts, but we can actually show as many accounts as you have. I thought my computer was freezing again. And we show all of your balances that are relevant to the bank. As well, we created a more customizable screen view at an account level that a client can dig into and see the data. So a couple of things, again, it brings over the balance detail. It allows you to provide filters to if you wanted to create a day or maybe look at a week or a month. And then it shows you those details and you can view in and see additional details. Obviously, it's all dummy data here. But more importantly, I think what's been really interesting is we created a NetSuite ready CSV directly from this screen that can be uploaded into the Recon module. We've been doing a ton of enhancements on this. One of the things we learned is that these codes, what are called BAI codes, are really bank, obviously this is a standard across all of our banks, but the data that goes with each of these codes can be really different, and the level of data that comes over can be significantly different. And so what we've been spending time really is knowing if we have a CSV or a BAI2, what is the most important data we can provide in that output, knowing what we know about this code. I know that's a lot of data to throw at all the users, but it's really why it's challenging for clients, bank by bank and pay type by pay type to sort of help reconcile these payments. So we've been spending a lot of time working with clients and trying to improve this. Our goal long-term is to deliver this directly into the Recon module. We tried out some, we're having a couple of hiccups with it based on some NetSuite limitations. So that's really our goal long-term, is that we deliver this directly into the Recon module. But in the interim, we have delivered some really robust capabilities around helping reconcile your ACH batch payments that settle as a batch, and really providing you that detail back to the bill level so it automatically reconciles all your ACH transactions from the prior day. The feedback from our pilot clients on that has been it's a huge time saver and automation of that reconciliation for those prior day activities. So really, that's where we think we will spend a lot of time next year, is not just international, but more importantly on really trying to take some of the heavy lift off of reconciliation for clients. So I'll stop there. Any questions? I'll pop this back up so maybe I can see. Oops.
No, it looks like our Q&A is empty.
Pretty good. Perfect. And so I can stop sharing there. So that's, whoops. Won't stop sharing there. So that's pretty much what we've built. And I can't say it enough. It's been the flexibility and the open nature of NetSuite that's allowed us the ability to do this sort of build, and we're really excited about it. And what we've seen is that it really has gained a lot of efficiencies and automation, but more importantly, we've been shocked at the number of controllers and CFOs who are happy about the fact that they don't worry about what's happening sort of between their ERP, NetSuite, and the bank portal. And so we think that's really been the benefit lately.
Well, now the Q&A is lighting up there, Deb.
Oh,
so
perfect.
Open that up and
there it is.
Take a look at some questions coming in.
A foreign currency pay, what would be the exchange rate on the bill payment? So that's actually, June, something we're actually looking at. So right now we're supporting wire payments cross-border, but it's where it stays in US dollar currency. Our next move will be to bring in live FX rates. So at the time, similar to a banking portal, that at the time that you're making the payment, you actually can see the rate that's indicative. And then on that reconciliation, you would have the finalized rate displayed for you as part of the reconciliation. The timing of the international wire capability. So we're rolled out today, piloting in Asia. We're putting a pause on Europe until we can complete the SEPA and backspill, because that seems to have a higher use case right now for the clients who are using this. And then we'll pick up in Europe. The US wire is rolling out at the end of December. Oh, hold on, where is it? Blank. This is great. Oh, thanks. Craig's cleaning up the Q&A for me. Thank you, Craig. I need you around my house later on today. Bank rate or rate in NetSuite. It will be the bank rate. So it would be indicative of the JP Morgan rate for that payment, because it would be part of our app. And again, that indicative rate is usually exactly what you'll see. I think I've heard some like crazy stat, like 99.99% of the time. But then again, you'd see that in reconciliation. Who do we have to be contact to become a customer? So we have a email address I can provide. Craig, I don't know if we provided that already, or I can do that afterwards if that helps.
And we can also follow up with everybody and provide that after with our follow-up emails.
Craig, we'll send, this is Travis. Hi, everybody. We'll send out a follow-up email to the group with different contact information for the various geographies. I know we have a lot of folks on the call from a variety of places, which is why we had a few folks on the call earlier. We just want to make sure we get you guys in contact with the right folks. So depending on where you are, we will get you the right contact information.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thanks, Travis. Good thing you're on here to keep me honest. Okay, so then we have Mona, the question about the customer deposit. So I think what you're saying is inbound receipts into your account. Those would display on that reconciliation module I had mentioned about, it would show all of your account activity. So you would see credits to your account as ACH or wire. I will mention as well, one of the other items we are piloting is to be able to help you match your invoices with your inbound credits. So not necessarily in NetSuite, it would happen in our back office, but we automate the data exchange between NetSuite and our back office to help basically automate your cash application. So I'm not sure if your question is more, you'll see any credits to your account through that recon module I showed you, but as well, we're looking to pilot, we started a pilot already about what if we took the data about open invoices in NetSuite and marry that up with the data, that robust data that comes into the bank, and use that to automate your cash application. Could we set up check payment approval workflow in this bundle? Not in the bundle, but I mentioned that when the file gets created, that goes to a module within our banking portal that is basically a workflow tool. The benefit with that is you get visibility to it as well. It uses bank level entitlements. So when they come into that bill pay page, it's already approved bills to pay. Once you pay them over in our JP Morgan Access module or application, which is our banking portal, you can have multiple users who approve. You can set different thresholds for payment amounts, and then that could be a workflow tool. We require at least one person to release the file on our end. Are we allowed to use this app if we're not a customer? No, unfortunately, the app all directly connects to us as a banking partner. We don't connect to other banks. Where do we say vendor bank information for ACH? It's actually in the native NetSuite vendor bundle. We have built out an extended bundle if the vendor is outside the US, because obviously we need to support different data elements, as well as for US wires. So, but for just straight ACH or Canadian or check print or even single use account, the native NetSuite vendor bundle is where it's stored. Does it auto reconcile with the bank? So that was when I was mentioning that CSV file. We've seen a huge lift. It was very exciting about 2 weeks ago, where it auto reconciles all of your ACH prior day activity. So if you do a lot of ACH payments, it actually does auto reconcile your checks too, because it brings that data in natively in that CSV. And then when it loads in the NetSuite module, it finds that match really easily. Our work this year has been about really refining that CSV so that more things auto reconcile.
All right, Deb, I am sharing my screen again, and I'm launching our closing poll for all of our participants today. This is not a CPE poll. This is for everybody to take part in. If you'd like to give us some feedback on how the event went today. Deb, that was a great presentation, or great feedback from the audience. I have a feeling that if you're, not a JP Morgan customer, that this integration in NetSuite is going to push some people your way, and you're going to have some new corporate banking accounts open, because I really haven't seen a lot of the functionality that you're providing to the NetSuite ecosystem coming from other entities. So I think everybody's excited about this, as referenced by just how many people we still have with us today in our user group, and I know that we're looking forward to working with you as well. So
yeah, no, thank you, and this is perfect, and we look for more people using it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Deb. I am now going to bring back Thomas Grigley, who's going to, he talked a little bit about what FloQast does before, but now we're going to give him a chance to really talk it up. Tom, you with us?
Most definitely. Yeah. Thomas here. Again, pleasure for the opportunity to present today and to sponsor. Truly hope there are accountants in the audience who appreciate the best practice tips and tricks in my previous presentation. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm a Senior Strategic Alliance Manager at FloQast. And really what I do is I specialize in creating partnerships in the NetSuite ecosystem. So if you aren't familiar with FloQast, we provide accounting workflow automation software that helps accounting teams improve the speed and accuracy of the financial close and audit. So in short, what we're doing is extending NetSuite's reconciliation and workflow capabilities. And as a verified suite app, we're actually on one of NetSuite's partners of the year of 2020. So we actually won the partner of the year with NetSuite in 2020. And the major reason for this is because we become the leading provider of financial close software in the NetSuite ecosystem. So we have just over 1,000 clients total, and over 400 of those leverage FloQast and NetSuite jointly. And these include companies like Lyft, Okta, Zoom, and many others in all different industries. I think the major reason for our success is just the fact that with our exponential growth, we've been able to maintain the highest customer satisfaction rating of all financial applications on G2 Crowd. So in my opinion, the main reason so many NetSuite teams love FloQast is because we're not only built by accountants and former auditors, but every team within FloQast has former accountants. And very importantly, our setup team is made up of entirely CPAs and accountants. Our key product managers are accountants. All of our sales engineers that help our account executives with evaluations are accountants. And many are actually even former users. So we know the problem of the month-end close very personally. And Craig, if you can go to the next slide for me. And when it comes to, I guess, rather using the next 2 minutes I think I have here to list off features of what FloQast is doing, rather than do that, I thought I'd actually just highlight the problems that we actually solve, right? So if you're an accountant experiencing issues with inefficient status update meetings, or if you're spending a lot of time recreating your month-end checklist and recreating reconciliations each month and recreating supporting documentation and file storage structures, FloQast can help, right? And if you're having trouble finding supporting documentation, right, in your controllers and the different team members are spending a lot of time kind of digging through different folder structures and trying to find out where that reconciliation was saved or whether this item that might be a dependency is actually done, FloQast can help. If you have 50 plus reconciliations, right, that you're having to manually tick and tie each month, right, where you're kind of refreshing the trial balance in NetSuite and kind of eyeballing that trial balance, ending balance, and then going in, finding that Excel reconciliation, opening it up, finding the ending balance in the reconciliation and manually eyeballing it to see if there's a variance that's material, that whole ticking and tying process. It's a lot of words. It's complicated and it's a burden. If that's a problem, FloQast can help, because with one click across all reconciliations, you could see if there's any material variances that need to be addressed. If there's accounts, think of NetSuite's bank rec module, right, where you're automation, the reconciling of transactions. If there are other accounts like credit cards or intercompany or clearing accounts that need that same functionality, FloQast can help. If you're manually performing prepaid amortization schedules, FloQast can help and upgrade that Excel amortization schedule with our application. If the review process for the controller or process owner is a pain to go through, FloQast can help. And this is really aligned with the audit as well. The review becomes a pain when you have to spend a lot of time gathering the information you need. Same thing with the audit. It becomes a pain when auditors are bugging the team for PBC requests or prepared by client requests and spending a lot of time, and the team spending a lot of time just trying to gather that intel for them. With FloQast, by centralizing all month-end workflow, by centralizing the reconciliations and all the supporting documentation, there's this one command center for the close that you can actually point auditors to and give them access to certain things, right? And allow them to grab their own PBC requests. So a lot of our clients have been able to reduce their audit fees by 15 or 10%, or just mitigate any increases, because we know that audit fees are more often increasing than a lot of other fees. It's kind of a common thing. So FloQast has allowed our clients to actually get in a position of power to say, hey, look at all the progress we've made since last year's audit. This is going to be a lot easier for you. And it actually gives you a shot of not having increased audit fees. Aside from that, the main takeaway by helping out with the things I just described is reduction in days to close. With that said, I think I'm up in my 5 minutes. Craig, I think I can pass it back to you, and really appreciate the opportunity to present. And I hope people got something out of my presentations today.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Tom. We're winding down today. We were a little early, which is very rare for us, as I keep repeating. But I'm going to take this opportunity now to ask all of our panelists to unmute yourself and share your video. We're going to bring everybody back on. I'm also going to say some thank yous to Brian Flynn of Team BSP, Adam Porter at Nolan, Tom Miller, who's still with us, Thomas Grigley, who's still with us, Wing Chan. Everybody has been participating in the Q&As and the panelists moderation, and I want to thank everybody for your help in making this a really successful event today. I think we had a really great time. To all of our participants still with us, and there are a lot of you still here, if you have questions, we're going to open up the floor now. So feel free to ask any of our panelists any question that you might have. We're going to try to make this as open forum as possible. You can either utilize the Q&A panel, or we'll try with the hand raising here. If you want to raise your hand using the Zoom interface, we can also share your audio and video and get you live into the conversation with this amazing panel of people that have helped us out today. So floor is open. And while we wait for some of those questions to come in, let me reiterate my sincere thanks to all of our sponsors, and remind that everybody that was here today speaking with you is open and ready to help you. We are picking up the phones. We are here to support you, whether we're a third-party software application that you need some support with in your NetSuite workflows, or partners like BSP and Nolan, who are always here to help you with your questions. Please feel free to let us know how you enjoyed today's session. And with that poll, we asked whether or not you'd like to be contacted by somebody for the Q4 NetSuite user group, and we thank you for those responses. We'll forward them off to the appropriate people. It's a little quiet. Does any users want to say hi? Anybody that we haven't seen in a while because of COVID just want to hop on camera and say hello, some familiar faces, please feel free to do so. If we don't have any additional participation today, that will wrap us up. Oh, wait, we're getting maybe some chats here. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Thanks, Deb. My boss is saying he can't unmute himself. That's because I didn't give him a panelist link. I only gave him an attendee link, so he can't say hi. He also said he doesn't have anything to say, so that's not an issue. This last slide is just a thank you to all of our participants. We had a really successful 2020 year despite everything that's been going on. We had great participation at our user groups. We had really rousing conversations with a lot of wonderful people who came to help us out and help educate the user group and make it really fun and exciting. I want to wish everybody a really happy and healthy holiday season, and look forward to seeing all of you again in Q1 of 2021. We're going to go back live eventually. It's going to happen. I know it. And when we do, I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody in person again. Panelists, any... Gary Johnson, can anybody speak to affiliate partner programs? I guess for all of the software solutions that are third-party bolt-on, add-on, built for NetSuite solutions, there are partnership programs available. we're partnered with most of them. I'm sure Adam and Team Nolan are as well. Tom, I'm pretty sure you got a partner program. Tom Miller, Tom Grigley, you guys have a partner program. So if you're interested in that and you want to sign up for these programs, get in touch with each of the companies that were speaking with us today or speaking with us at any other user group in the 2020 program, right? All right. Tom, I like that shirt. What's it say other than best?
Strategic account manager ever.
Best strategic account manager ever? I'll give you that award. I'll give you that award. That's a good one. And if anybody noticed, Tom and I are growing out our COVID beards. We're
needed something to do during those months.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well,
Craig, was good meeting. Thank you.
It's a great meeting, everybody. Thanks for all of our sponsors. Thanks for all of our participants. There's still 48 of you with us, but nobody's asking any questions. So I think we're going to leave it at that. And we will see you again in 2021. And we're really looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.